Good evening, everyone. You're in the right place at the right time. This is Coast to Coast AM, blasting out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, blazing across the land, slamming into your radio like a supercharged nanoparticle of unobtainium. Greetings from the boldest, bawdiest, most outrageous city in the world, the planetary capital of sun, fun, sin, sex, and secrets, my not-so-humble hometown, Las Vegas, Nevada. My name is George Knapp, your occasional host, designated driver of the airwaves, and moderator of tonight's upcoming cacophonous cavalcade of conversation. That's what I'm expecting anyway. We've got a major league doubleheader for you tonight. Two intrepid investigators who pursued the same subject but from different angles. The subject is a good one, giants. For as long as humans have been around, we've told each other stories about giants, beings who look like us, only a lot bigger. I don't mean Jack and the Beanstalk giants or Paul Bunyan folklore giants, but actual flesh and blood, long-legged, big-jawed giants. David and Goliath type giants, only bigger. There are giants in Bible stories, starting with Genesis, giants in Greek and Roman and Norse mythology, giants of legend that grind our bones to make their bread. Abraham Lincoln wrote about giants. And in the oral traditions of Native Americans and other indigenous peoples all over the world, there are all kinds of stories about giants. Some of them covered with hair, like Sasquatch. Some of them red-headed, very tall humanoids. Think Bill Walton. So what's the deal on giants? Should we take this stuff seriously? Or do we relegate it to the world of legend and folklore, the same realm where fairies and elves still dwell? Or maybe we agree it's real, but only in a fictional sense, like that very large, very jolly, very green fella who, as my friend Lee Spiegel put it, rules over the kingdom of frozen vegetables. You know who he is. Let's find out. I'm with you. So I'd like to know if there's any evidence, and if so, where's it been? Where's it hiding? Coming up in the second half of the program tonight, an Emmy-winning writer, producer, and filmmaker who got hooked on the topic of giants a few years ago and who put together a pretty amazing compilation of legitimate news stories culled from hundreds of North American newspapers over the last, 200 years. And we're not talking about the weekly world news here. I mean the New York Times, the Chicago Tribune, the Oakland Tribune, big papers and regional papers and small town papers, but legit. Stories about burial mounds, skeletons found in hidden caves, on farms, all over the place, from the West Coast to the East Coast, and pretty much every state in between. I'll tell you, the sheer number of reports was, to me, astonishing. So what do you make of all these stories? And if they're true, where are all of these big bones? I hope to find out. Richard Dewhurst is the author of Ancient Giants Who Ruled America, and he will join us 2 hours from now. But first, a scientist, veterinarian, DNA analyst, expert witness, and author, Dr. Melba Ketchum. You might recall when we first spoke to Melba on this program, it was to focus on her research in the area of Bigfoot, specifically Bigfoot DNA. She spearheaded a remarkable project to collect and analyze hair samples collected by Sasquatch researchers all over the country. The analysis, they tried their best to conduct it in secrecy. At least that was the intent. But, when word got out what she was up to, a lot of people tried to sabotage that project. And you can just guess how her results were received when she tried to get a paper published in any number of science journals. Listeners to this program can guess how that culminated. Dr. Ketchum is still on the trail of Sasquatch DNA, but as she told us the last time she was here, she kind of hinted that she's expanding her horizons a bit, got some crowdsourced funding to test DNA samples of what are purported to be giants, and more than giants, some other pretty weird specimens. We're going to hear all about it, all that she's been doing, and what evidence, if any, she's accumulated to support her various hypotheses. If you've heard Melba in any previous interviews with me, you know she is feisty, she stands up for herself and her work and her team, as it should be, and she's not going to go away quietly, as some, I think, in the Bigfoot world would like, nor is she going to back down to science poobahs who've never even been willing to fairly examine the work she's already done. Dr. Melba Ketchum joins me in just a minute to talk about the search for giant DNA, a Sasquatch update, maybe a Dogman tale as well. Good stuff. I think this will be a lot of fun. Couple of quick news notes. As I mentioned last night in the program, Colin Andrews, well known for his decades of work regarding the crop circle mystery and related subjects, was rushed to the hospital in Connecticut yesterday. He sent me a note today to say he is at home now. He's recuperating. The worst is over, but I think he still has a rough road ahead. So if you know Colin, maybe send him a note of encouragement. If you don't know him, maybe send him some positive vibes. It can't hurt. To all those who sent me emails over the last couple of days to ask if I think Texas and a couple of other states are about to be invaded by American troops because of these plans for this multi-state, fairly routine training operation have been leaked, folks, come on. There are real problems worth worrying about in the world. Do we really have to make up some new ones? Put it this way, if you were in charge of everything and you wanted to pick a state to invade, would you pick Texas? I think that would be a mistake. You asked me for my opinion. My opinion is it's a total crock, greatly exaggerated. So that's that. Got the big guy, Webmaster Lex, working with me tonight, and my friend Dan Galante in the control room. Gina Salvati handling our calls. We promise to carve out some time with both guests so you can ask some questions, make some comments. Lex and I have put together our usual assortment of items and oddities that we appropriated from here and there. We call it Naps News, and we put it up on the Coast website among the stories of interest that you can check out when you have some time. Something fun sent to me today by Ben Hansen. You might know Ben. He's been on this program. He's been on network television all over the place, and he does a lot of speaking engagements at conferences around the country. He does a lot of work, as he did for the government, analyzing nonverbal clues to figure out if people are telling the truth. And he's put together an entertaining analysis of President Obama's recent appearance with Jimmy Kimmel, in which Kimmel asked the president about aliens at Area 51. He did sort of the same thing a couple of months ago with Bill Clinton, and Ben also analyzed that, and it was the results were very entertaining. So does Ben think Obama was being honest? Take a guess on that one. It's an illuminating video, but don't watch it now because it's too long and you'll miss the radio show. Click on it later. It'll still be there, I promise. On the subject of folklore versus reality, which we will discuss tonight as we explore evidence for giants, we have an article about elves, how they are viewed in the nation of Iceland. They take it very seriously. If you're going to build a bridge, if you're going to build a highway, you better make sure you've got clearance from the elves. It's a fun story. A story also that's a follow-up to last Sunday's interview, explosive interview, I should say, with Dave Paulides. If you heard that show, you know what I mean. Remember, I mentioned during the program that we got a report as we were broadcasting about a missing hiker in Yosemite. Dave, of course, has reported to us many times about these strange circumstances surrounding hundreds and hundreds of missing people in national parks and forests. Well, we had a report come in while we were on the air. This guy was found, though. This hiker in Yosemite was found, but the circumstances are strange. And even though he's alive, the guy hasn't been able to say much yet about what happened during the 2 days he was gone. Got another story there about Elvis and the extraterrestrials. Who could ask for more than that? Those and more in Naps News. Check it out. And while you're on the website, click on the section about how to become a Coast Insider. The cost is pennies a day. It allows you to access our vast archive of previous shows. You can listen anytime you want. Great deal. All right, 10 Hut, you're all on notice. You know what to do. You know the drill. Dog and cat in the house. Door locked. Coffee cup filled, slippers, jammies, robe on, turn that light down low, plop into that easy chair, and let's get cooking. In a minute, Dr. Melba Ketchum and the search for some very special DNA evidence. I'm George Knapp, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. We've had Dr. Melba Ketchum on the program a couple of times. I have enjoyed every one of those interviews we've done with her. She's the founder of DNA Diagnostics, which was established in 1985. It's become a leader in all types of DNA testing, including human and animal paternity and parentage testing, disease diagnostics, trait tests, animal and human identity testing, species identification. She's testified in a lot of court trials. She was the 3-time chairperson of the International Society for Animal Genetics, Equine Genetics, and Standing Committee. She's done a heck of a lot of work in this area, but probably is best known for her work in trying to sequence DNA submitted from suspected Sasquatch specimens from around the country, and she's taken a lot of flack from it, but she is still pounding away and fighting, and we're going to ask her about that work as well as searching for giant DNA. Melba, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having me, George.
Let's cover this for a minute. Let's do a little recap for a second before we jump into giants. I was reading online in preparation for the interview, just checking out what kind of slings and arrows had been fired in your direction since the last time we spoke, and just the stuff that people come up with is just really unfair. And it's unfair because I know the sequence of events, how this whole thing unfolded, before we could even talk about it publicly, and the kind of stuff that you've had to put up with since the beginning. I'd like you to share with the audience, for those who think that science is everything and it's a fair arbiter of facts, share with the audience how you were treated. My idea, the line I've used before is, science is supposed to investigate the unexplained, not to explain the uninvestigated. Is that what has happened with you? How did it work?
Well, it's definitely been a travesty. I've been maligned by every type of creature on the planet, I think. The science part of it, some of the better scientists have quietly supported me, but they're afraid to come out with their support publicly because of what's happened to me. In fact, we have a group that's working on our genomes right now, and we don't know if they'll let us go public with their findings or not, because they're very concerned about, what's going to happen to their reputations, when this happens. And I don't blame them, because it's rough. You get the scientists, and oddly enough, we've not had any really well-qualified scientists come out against it. It's been people that may have an expertise like in just mitochondrial DNA, or maybe somebody who, is a chemist or something. Not geneticists. We haven't had geneticists come out against us. They've just been deathly silent. We've not had, we've had some public support from people that are qualified too. There's one PhD that assembled a genome, was the first to assemble a certain genome, and he's come out and supported us. So, most of the people that are making the noise are not qualified to even review the papers. Some of them have admitted they haven't even read the whole paper.
Well, that was what I was getting at.
It's been rather ridiculous.
What really bothered me the most is you got scientists sitting on the sidelines now saying, well, this can't be true, and this never was peer-reviewed. You submitted it to these journals, and you know for a fact that these guys didn't even read it, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's. I've got the peer reviews are online. There's a link to them at the bottom of the SasquatchGenomeProject.org website, where the paper is. The very last link will take you to the peer reviews. And what happens when it's peer-reviewed and not just passed to go ahead and be published, they give you recommendations of what they want to see before they'll publish it. And you're supposed to respond to those, which I did. And, like one of them that reviewed it said, we need you to have whole mitochondrial genomes on this. Well, we already had about 18 at the time, and when we resubmitted, we had 30. So thereabouts, 20 whole and large sections of mitochondrial DNA on another 10. So we had already had that in the paper, and I addressed that. I said, look on page such and such, and here it is. And we had another one that just made fun of us and basically said, you mean to tell me you had Caucasian woman running around the woods with unknown hominid and has a baby and gives it to him? I don't think so. I mean, we had all kinds of craziness, and it was so uncalled for because it was a legitimate paper, and we did huge amounts of work on it, including whole genomes. And about the same time, a publication called PLOS One, which is another interdisciplinary journal, and they're much more lenient on what they'll publish. We sent it to them, and it's online on my YouTube channel, Dr. Melba Ketchum. It's got a video. At the end, I disclosed their email they sent me, where it says, those hair samples could have been from any old animal, so they didn't even send it out for peer review. We got it back like the next day with a turn down that they wouldn't even send it out for peer review. Now, I mean, that's just not right at all. And especially the fact that DNA testing, you can use species identification with it. And what's the point of having the hair samples if we don't test them to see what they are?
The other part that really frustrates...
problems.
The other part that really frosted me is, you do these blind studies. You got the samples, you submitted them to different labs. You didn't tell these labs what it was you were doing. I mean, you didn't say, hey, we're testing Sasquatch. You just had them do the test. They come back with these very strange results. Then they find out what it is, and they're horrified, right? Oh, my gosh, you can't
absolutely.
do this.
I've got an email on the website that, from one of the scientists, and, they were told they were human samples. And she writes a deal, and she says, we've got this beautiful sequence. We can see the primers. Everything's perfect. And she says, but it doesn't match anything in GenBank. Have you discovered a new species? We have this in writing from somebody who didn't know what they were testing. Perfectly legit. I mean, we tested the quality of the DNA, the picture of the yield gel to show the quality. It's not smeared. It's perfect. I even did a video on the main slings and arrows I've gotten, since they can't really fault the blind studies in the science, is that they want to say it's contaminated, either with animal or human. Well, there's very definite ways. I mean, being a forensic scientist, I definitely know how to deal with contamination, because you get it a lot of times when you're dealing with forensic samples, because they're picked up off a crime scene. And there's ways you can show it. I did a whole video, about 40 minutes and showed pictures even of what contamination looks like and how we knew we did not have contamination on these samples. But that was what they came up with from nature. That one guy, that the first round he was, made fun of it. The second round he just says, well, I just don't believe it. It has to be contaminated.
Yeah, there's no way they're going to publish this. There's no way they're going to publish this. There's no way they're ever going to publish this, because they don't want it to be true. Could you give us sort of
We did find a new journal to publish it, and 5 minutes before, we get a call saying they're not going to publish it, even though we had passing peer reviews. Those peer reviews are also, on that website. But anyway, we ended up having to basically acquire the journal to keep those peer reviews, those passing peer reviews. So, and then they said, oh, you just self-publish. We really didn't. I mean, we did in the fact that we acquired the journal, but we didn't get the peer reviews done. Somebody else had the peer reviews done.
Give me the thumbnail sketch of where that stands, Melba, what the final results showed and what the status of the research is. You're still chasing this, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Basically, they're human hybrids. The mitochondrial DNA is 100% modern human. Range of the date and age of the mitochondrial haplogroups range from 13,000 to 26,000 years. So that means that Bigfoot as we know it didn't exist before that. The hybridization with human beings occurred in that time period and later, because, there's even tales of today, Native American stories, and, I know some Native American people quite well, and they know of people that are hybrids, but they don't talk about it. They won't let you take their DNA, which I can understand that. They even know where, there's some buried. But they're not going to give out that information because burial is sacred to Native Americans, and they respect the Sasquatch. So, they are hybridized with humans for, long time. And that's what they are. They're basically just, a cross between a human and an unknown hominid species. And that's not uncommon. All Caucasians have a certain percentage of Neanderthal in them. That's a human hybrid. We're human hybrids. It's no different. It's just a little different as far as the amount of unknown versus human. And, of course, they look more like a Neanderthal shape-wise, their skeleton, except that they're much, much larger. And then there's the Denisovan hominids that they found from from Siberia, in a cave in Siberia, the Denisovan cave, and they took DNA from that individual. And those individuals are quite large, actually. And they are known to have, Native Americans have both Neanderthal and Denisovan genes in them. And that's a well-known thing now. It's well published in science. So all the Denisovans can have up to 7% Denisovan in Papua New Guinea population and the Aborigines of Australia. So there's, we're all hybrids. I'm sorry, it's just the truth. But they don't want to accept the fact that there's a living hybrid that doesn't look exactly like us.
Well, and you get it from both ends. You get it unfairly treated by the science establishment and the poobahs of science, and then you get it from the Bigfoot people because they all want to be the one that discovers the truth about Bigfoot, and they don't want you discovering it. When we come back, I want to ask you about the team, whether you're still out there looking for samples, and then we'll jump into giants. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum about the search for DNA evidence. If you're looking for a smoking gun, so's Robert Cray. He takes us into the break. Oh, it's a wild world, all right, maybe wilder than we can imagine. Among the stories we're going to discuss in the next segment with Dr. Melba Ketchum is a very strange incident and a very special DNA sample. It was acquired after a vehicle traveling in a western state collided late at night with some sort of a creature. It was dog-like, but standing on two legs. And because of the collision, there was DNA left on the vehicle. And Dr. Ketchum is doing some analysis, and I hope she's got some results and can tell us what she's found, because this is a very strange story. And then we move on into her search for evidence about giants, red-headed giants in particular. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. Talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum. Melba, I want to talk for just a moment more about Bigfoot work. How's your team doing? Are they still out there scouring the wilds for samples that can be analyzed? I was worried that maybe they'd be a little disillusioned after the response to the whole DNA testing project and all the grief they must have taken, even from colleagues in the Bigfoot community who just didn't want it to be true.
Yeah, they pretty well have all backed off to a large extent. Some of them are still collecting samples, but it's not like it was, because there was nothing more disheartening than to have all these great results and the blind studies, double-blind studies, and having all the science done properly and at great expense, because back then, over that 5-year period, testing costs were phenomenally high. And then to have basically none of the news media pick it up to speak of, and to have all the backlash from I call them the ape group, the ones that just can't believe Bigfoot isn't an ape, and like you say, those that want to be first, and they weren't. With all the backlash and hate out there, I mean, all of us just got really disgusted, and even my scientific team, they got hit so hard that I told them, I said, I'll take over here, just refer them back to me, because you got families to feed. And, I mean, because there were horrible, threats and things said. And, these people have to testify in court. So it ruined me for testifying in court, because they used all the lies out there to try to discredit me. But I didn't want them to be hurt. So that part backed off. But the research continues, because we do have, like I say, a very large university system that's currently working on our genomes. And hopefully they'll allow us to go public with what they end up with, because the idea is to get percentages of anything they find that matches in GenBank. And so we can maybe get some type of philo tree on the unknown side. Like, for instance, there's unknown DNA in the Denisovan individual. What if it's the same unknown, it matches that's in the Sasquatch samples? So, there's work going on at this time. If they choose not to go public, then I'll have the information. I'll try to get another group to work on it. At some point, somebody will come out with it. Because, I mean, I know the science was right. I know the DNA was good. There's no reason for this not to happen. But you have to get, these big university labs to be friendly to the idea, because you have to have a supercomputer, you have to have specialized software and know how to use the different algorithms to pull out all these sequences. And it's quite involved, and, there's just literally terabyte after terabyte of data, and it takes, you can start those computers, and even with supercomputers, it'll take days and days and days just to get any kind of little small result. So, that's where we're at with that. We have some other Bigfoot samples that we're wanting to test, and this kind of leads into the giants. We don't know if the giant samples we have may turn out to be Bigfoot samples. Are they the same thing? Are they not? We don't know. I mean, there's all different descriptions of your Sasquatch. Some of them have almost no hair. Others are just completely loaded in hair. So, we are not sure. We need to investigate. And also, is there a relationship between DNA in these giant samples and in the Bigfoot samples, even if they're separate species?
I don't want to backtrack too much because that was a great segue you just made on my behalf. So I'll come right back to that. But and I don't want to beat a dead horse here or a dead Sasquatch. But I'm just thinking about all these Bigfoot researchers who have dedicated their lives to it, their hearts in it. They go out on the weekends. They put their own dime, their everything on the line to look in the woods to search. They want truth. They want answers. And they get nothing but grief for it. And then they have to deal with these nitwits who drag out an old fur coat every couple of months and try to pass it off as Bigfoot, or the other guys who say, boy, I can't wait to shoot one. I mean, the whole thing is a mess, and there's all these well-meaning people who just want to get to the bottom of it, and they just get hammered from every side.
Well, see, the whole thing is we got to the bottom of it, but due to the number of haters, I call them haters for lack of a better way to say it, and the hoaxers, all of these different people that hurt the whole study of these things, make it to the point that, you can have beautiful footage and they're going to call it fake. You can have, just about everything perfect about it and they're going to call it fake because of their own agendas and other reasons. And with that happening, it puts a stigma on the Sasquatch testing of any sorts, and on the videos too, for that matter. And so it just makes it that much worse. And that's also backlash that hurt the paper was the fact that, everybody, there's a stigma of, oh, you're crazy if you believe in Bigfoot. And, they wanted to believe that instead of looking at real science.
Let's talk about giants then. So you were saying that Bigfoot, humanoids, there's a real big question mark on which is which and whether it's both or neither, or, it's hard to separate the two, right?
Well, we don't know DNA-wise, and that's something that's just a huge question that we're going to answer. We've raised enough money to do several of these samples. I was hoping to raise enough to do all of the samples because we've got about 17 samples that are, of interesting origin, let's put it that way. Either they have some type of a cone type head or a elongated type head, or they're giants. And we want to test all these samples. We really do. We want to get to the bottom of all of this. We've got the DNA extracted. There's been some preliminaries run on some of these samples. And but like with everything else, we need whole genomes to really know where they sit and if they are just regular humans that have, boarded their heads. Are they regular humans that have just grown extra tall, or are they something else? Are they a lineage of humans like Neanderthal or Denisovan, or that are unknown, that are infiltrated into the DNA that, is probably a mix with regular humans? And that's what we need to get to the bottom of. And I've got the stuff to do it with. It's just the funding that has to be done. And it's not even that expensive anymore. It's come down 90% since the Sasquatch study. We can now get the extractions done and everything tested, just the preliminaries as far as the whole genome's done for anywhere from $1,800 to $2,500 a piece, which is hugely cheap since we paid $13,000 last time. So,
talk to me about how you got hooked on the giant part of this. I understand the evolution or your interest in Bigfoot, but how did it happen?
Well, it came up because of the Sasquatch. We ended up with, Dave Pilates actually submitted a giant humerus, and he says maybe this is a Bigfoot. And whatever it is, it's not a bear, and that's the largest animal around where it came from. And it's bumpy on the cortex of the bone is very bumpy and thickened. That shows it's borne tremendous weight, which means whatever it had was huge. And it's long enough that it'll extend about from my wrist to my shoulder. It's huge, and I'm 5'7", so I'm not short. So, and my arms and legs are fairly long. So, it's a long bone, and it's from something that's very large, and we need to get that tested. And that thinking it might be a Sasquatch bone, started the giant thing, and then it just kind of went from there. I was contacted by other people that had giant type of remains, and so it just kind of evolved from the Sasquatch study into the giants. But now I've done more research on the giants, and it's very interesting. And I've spoken with people that there's several caches of giant bones out there. There's a huge cover-up. They disappear from a lot of countries, but there's a few countries that have them. And we're, trying to see if we can't get some testing done on those as well as what we've got. If we do, it's going to prove huge things, literally.
So let's go back to this bone that Dave Politis came up with. Do you have details on where he found it, or do you want to?
It's
prefer
the
not to
Pacific
talk about it?
Northwest. I know that, but I don't know how much he'd want me to share about it. So,
Okay.
just that it's a really big humerus, and the ends are broken off, and it's still huge.
And have you done any preliminary kind of tests on it?
No, because we're saving every bit of the DNA for the whole genomes, because there's never a guarantee you're going to get a whole genome, and that bone is very much in question just because it was found in a wet area, and but I'm hoping that the thickness of the cortex of the bone will provide. It doesn't take hardly any DNA nowadays to get a whole genome if it's handled correctly, and so we're hoping we'll get that. We have, like I say, we also have giant teeth. We have the museum giants that were not on display, and they got upset, actually, when they found out we were getting ready to test them.
When Richard Dewhurst comes on, we're going to talk about these, you just referred to these caches of bones, and there are all these newspaper articles for over 150, 200 years that talk about burial mounds, giants, skeletons, a lot of bones. I mean, not just a dozen or two, but hundreds, thousands. It's hard to understand where all those bones went. How do you cover something that big, that widespread?
Well,
What's your thought?
They can come in and take anything they want, in case we haven't figured that out by now. I'm surprised they left me alone. I think it's probably just because they so thoroughly discredited me. But, I really hoped they would have come out and actually supported this and get it out in the right way so it wouldn't frighten people as far as the Sasquatch. But the giants, they just disappear. But the thing is, they're not disappearing in every country. And, there's a couple of countries out there that have these bones, and they're starting to be approachable about actually testing these giant remains, and that's good. And there's a lot of credible stories, and with the new type of satellite and ground-seeking radar and everything that they have, explorers are able to find these, what's in the burial mounds and what's in different places. You just have to make sure that, it's like they're denoting them all as Native American in this country pretty much, so you can't go digging them up unless they're on private property. And, elsewhere in the world it's more lenient. So I'm looking forward. I know for a fact this is being done by several groups. So I'm hoping that, we'll be able to get in on and test them alongside the samples we already have.
I mentioned in the introduction how long in human history, far back these stories go. I mean, there are all kinds of biblical references to giants. And they write it, it's written in sort of a literal way. It's not sort of using symbology or generic terms. They said giants, and Goliath.
Exactly.
And, what is the overall picture that has convinced you that maybe there was a race of giants, and how do you think it fits in what we know about human history?
Well, I know for a fact that, there's giants on cave walls. There's giants, depicted throughout, our history, even from, right after the flood on, it's been recorded. And all of your cultures have always talked about giants. And, I can't believe that every culture on the planet would have giant stories if they didn't exist at some point. And, there's even an interesting story out there that allegedly a live one was actually killed in Afghanistan by the military and flown back to the States. The corpse was, allegedly. You never know if those kind of stories are actually true, but it did come from military sources as far as, somebody spoke. But I also have had conversations with people that have seen some different kind of creatures like that, and I don't know whether to believe it or not. Science is what talks to me. But where there's smoke, there's fire, and definitely historically they existed. There's been too many reports of the bones. We've got bones that I can't explain why they're so big, that are, human-type bones. And so, there's got to be something there. And we've got probably, so far, the best stash of unknown type of skeletal remains that there is. And that's why I want so much to get them all tested, not just a few. And
why can it be just, we've got some pretty tall people. We've got 7-footers all over the place in the NBA. We've got, I forget what the record is for the tallest human being, but it's maybe almost 8 feet tall. Gigantism, afflictions like that, an overactive pituitary that can cause people to get really, really big. I mean, why couldn't the skeletal remains that have been mentioned in these reports just be extraordinary regular people, but not an entire race of these things?
Well, they could. I think there's several races, for one thing, and they could be people. That's why we're testing. But the flip side of it is a lot of these had double rows of teeth and 6 fingers and toes, and that's not a normal thing along with a tall person. And besides that particular type of morphology on their skeletal remains, you've got even those that are shaped more human. The skulls are not shaped the same. I mean, they're more like a Bigfoot without a cone head. They've got the heavy brow ridge. They've got a real thickened mandible. The back side of the skull is more elongated back. I'm not talking about the true elongated skulls. I'm just talking that it goes back further than ours. And so there's some morphological differences in these remains that, if they're human, they're another race that we haven't seen, I believe.
You expect to find some surprise.
DNA will tell the story on it.
You expect to find some surprises in that DNA, or do you not want to say that?
I think they'll, at the very least, I think it'll be at least as different or more so as the Pygmy tribes in Africa, which are quite different from the rest of humanity. At the very least, at the most, we'll get something more along the lines of our Sasquatch samples, where we've got a lot of unknown DNA. I think it's going to fall somewhere in between the Sasquatch and modern human is what I think it's going to do. But I think there will be a fair amount of unknown sequence in there. That's just a projection. I won't know till I test.
I mean, could it be just it's all human DNA and it's a mutation of some sort, or you really think there's going to be something that we will call foreign in there?
Different, because I think there would be more tall people around if there wasn't. I mean, why would they die out like they have? I mean, these remains are older. Back in older times, people were much shorter due to the, food supply, parasitism, medicine wasn't as good. So, the average person was in the, 5 foot to 5'5" range, and you get people that are, not just, 1 or 2, 3 or 4 here or there, you could think, oh, yeah, it's a pituitary tumor. But not in the numbers they're getting, and not in groups. Like, if you go back, and your next guest is I'm sure going to talk about this, where you got all these reports of multiple tall people. You're not going to get multiple tall people in a burial with a pituitary tumor. You're going to get one because it's quite rare.
How much stock do you take in the stories that are told in biblical stories?
I put a lot of stock in it because I'm a Christian. I have to. And, God created science, so science doesn't ever really disagree. It's just finding the right answer to tie it together. I've always had that interest. And actually the Bible is not all that different in some ways than some of the mythology of the Greeks and Romans and Egyptians and Sumerians. They mention satyrs in the Bible. They mention unicorns. They mention dragons. There's a lot of unusual creatures mentioned, just like in the other religions of the world. So And, this kind of leads into the next thing we'll talk about, because there are sightings of strange things that are not Bigfoot, and they're not necessarily giants, but they're different.
That sounds like a great transition there, Dr. Melba Ketchum, helping me segue into the next part of our interview. Hope you'll stick around. We're going to talk about some other very strange samples that she's hoping to test soon. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. It's a beautiful and ethereal ballad there from 1973's Brain Salad Surgery album, Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Good stuff. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum, a DNA analyst and researcher who's got some interesting samples on her plate, hoping to get some funding together to take a look at them and figure out where they came from, whether they're connected to reports throughout human history of a race of giants. When we come back, we'll pick up the conversation, and then in just a bit, we'll open up the phone lines with your questions and comments as well. Stay with us. Much more to come here on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Up in Carson City, Nevada, I've had a chance to visit the old Nevada State Prison up there over the years. It's where the execution chamber for our state is located, and it's where Nevada's death row used to be. It was a maximum security prison for hundreds of years, or at least more than 100 years, more than a century. But the most interesting part about it is a quarry. It used to be a stone quarry, and before it became a prison, they found these gigantic footprints. I think they stretch about 45 feet. These prints had been made. It looks like a giant human foot. It had been made in the mud and then sort of preserved by time. And for a long time, it sure looked like what we would call Bigfoot prints. Some people say it might be a giant sloth, but when you combine it with some stories that we're going to talk about now from that same neck of the woods, that same part of the country, about another race, not Bigfoot, but red-headed giants. Melba, what do you know about red-headed giants?
There's a lot of almost every Native American tribe mentions them. They traded with them in some cases. In other cases, they were evil and enemies, and they would take the Native American babies and eat them. So they were cannibals in some cases. In other cases, they were not so feared. It just, I guess, depended on the tribe and the part of the country. But nearly every tribe has stories of these individuals. They're always denoted as basically red-headed giants. And we were fortunate enough to come up with a couple of these samples. Adrian Erickson actually facilitated this with the Erickson Project because we wanted to know if they were Sasquatch samples or not. And since bone testing is more time-consuming and it's more expensive, and we held back the bone samples, meaning the teeth from these red-headed giants, until now to test, because we wanted the hair samples were quick to run on the Sasquatch. Now, as far as on my Facebook, you can look at it, Dr. Melba Ketchum, or is my public Facebook. There's pictures of them, and one person was nice enough to do some scaling on the mandible that we took, one of the mandibles, and we got pictures of the mandibles that we took teeth from, and they're definitely much larger and thicker than a human. They have a silver dollar put between the mandibles, the back part of the mandible, or jawbone, I should say, and it shows that how large it really is. So they're bigger than our heads for sure. And these were not on display in this little museum, but we found out they had them. There was a donation made, and we were allowed to take teeth from two of the mandibles.
Are you talking about the museum in Winnemucca? A museum in Winnemucca? Yes. No kidding.
And there were more remains than just these that we were able to obtain. They conveniently disappeared. So, there was even a mummy found in that cave.
So we're talking about the cave at Lovelock?
Yes.
Well, it's for the benefit of the audience, the story that's been told by the Paiutes, or the Shoshone people of that region of the Great Basin, is that they killed this race of red-headed giants. They trapped them in this cave and killed them. And in fact, that cave was filled with, I think, guano. It was mined for guano, but they found all kinds of artifacts and remains, but I didn't know that they found any actual remains that could be from giants. Is that is it the provenance of the samples that you have are from that cave?
There are several stories surrounding it. Now, first of all, it's on. It's been told that there were skeletal remains found in the cave. Because see what they did, they lit a big fire and suffocated them in the cave. And those remains, last we heard, were transferred to Berkeley, and they were never seen again. There is a draw somewhere, a little creek bed or something that's near this cave that these remains may have come from, but they were in the immediate vicinity. And like I say, the skulls are larger, and the forehead sloped back more, and the brow ridge is more prominent than most Native Americans, even though they have a bit of a prominent brow ridge. This seems to be more so. So we feel they are legitimate. Whether they came from the draw or whether they came from the cave, I can't honestly say. But either way, they're close enough in proximity, and the size of the remains are such that we truly believe that we're looking at remains from the red-headed giants. And
you don't have any hairs, do you? I mean, I can't imagine that they would ever be preserved.
This is hundreds of years old, so no.
Right. Is there any? Are there any
now,
reports?
Allegedly, there was a mummy in the cave that was pretty intact, but who knows where that went?
How many samples do you have altogether? Or can you say?
About 17 total of different types of samples. I can't remember if I included the dog man in that or not. I think I did.
And do you have a pretty good handle on where all of them came from?
I know where they all came from. Yes. Various parts of the country, and there's some from overseas too. So we've got teeth from Zana and Quit. I don't know if you've ever mentioned that story, but this is the Russian wild man back in the 1890s. Now, stop me if you've told this to your audience.
I have not. No, I have not. No.
Okay, back in the 1890s, there was a female wild man, that's what they call a Bigfoot, found in the Caucasus region of Russia. And she was captured. She was young at the time, and they chained her, and she ended up as the property of a nobleman. And he kept her chained as a slave, basically. And eventually they gentled her enough that she was able to work for him. And an eyewitness from the 1990s, she was 100 years old, was able to tell all about her even, said that she could carry hundreds of pounds of grain on her back without even any difficulty at all. She would break firewood between two trees. And she, of course, was covered in hair and very large, and she would charge the little ones because they would throw sticks at her and stuff, and she would scare them, and that was this lady remembered her vividly for that. She remembers seeing her walk behind the owner's cart, even, as she was carrying all this grain. So, we have a bunch of, over the decades, have had huge numbers of eyewitnesses' accounts. And what was interesting about this was that the nobleman that had her would throw these parties, and they would gamble, and if somebody won, they would get to have relations with the wild man. Zana was what they named her. And she bore 6 children. And of those 6 children, there were the first 2 she took down. After a while, they were able to let her loose to roam the village. The first 2 she took down to the river and washed them in cold water and killed them. So after that, the next 4 were raised by village people. So, and they don't look quite right, the photographs. I mean, they look human, and they don't have the hair on their bodies like a Sasquatch, but they've got the straight kind of line across as far as their mouth and the brow ridge, and I mean, they're just a little different looking. So one of her sons, they knew where he was buried. We have teeth from him. We have teeth from an unknown female that they think might have been Zana herself, and we're wanting to get genomes on them also. It's just a really compelling story of a wild man that's been captured, And nobody's ever done any. Now, there's been some mitochondrial DNA done. It showed that maternally, the female skull and Quit's skull, which is the son, are maternally related. So it's either going to be a sister or it's going to be Zana. And it'll be real interesting to find out the nuclear DNA. That's why we want to do genomes on these two samples, because that will ice the cake as far as Sasquatch research, because it should have a unknown quantity of DNA in this human Quit on the alleged son. So that would very much not only prove that they could mate with us as the stories tell, but also it would prove, what we've already proven. It would support it. Let's put it that way.
Is there a lineage?
So any story?
Is there a family lineage? Anybody still alive that you could identify that's linked to the
Yeah, there are
the
samples on down, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, but, the son is going to be the one that's the most close. That's why we need the genome on him. And, of course, mitochondrial DNA, it's just human anyway on the Sasquatch. So, there's already human results that have been done on the mitochondrial DNA for both, for Quit. So we know, and for the unknown, and they're the same, so that means they came from the same line. But where you're going to find your differences, once again, just like the Sasquatch study proved, is going to be in the nuclear DNA. That's why we need whole genomes to see if there's this percentage of unknown. If Quit tests out just as a regular human being with not any appreciable, amount of unknown DNA, 10 to 25% or so at least, then we can assume that the stories were not true, and it was probably a case of hypertrichosis. But if it turns out like all the eyewitnesses say, then that's undeniable proof, and there's a type specimen because we have both skulls, or rather, Igor Bartsev has both the skulls in Russia.
We have another case here from Nevada that a story I've covered over the years, Spirit Caveman. It sort of helped rewrite the history books about how long humans have been in North America, the story that we came over a land bridge, the Bering Straits, and all that stuff. And this specimen from this cave in northern Nevada proved to be much, much older than would be consistent with the prevailing views of science about how long people have been here. And although this...
Was it pre-Clovis?
Yes. Yeah, pre-Clovis.
Okay, did anybody test it?
Yeah, well, what I was getting to was the Native Americans, the tribe in there, opposed testing, so it was held up for a number of years because they said, look, this is an ancestor of ours, you can't test it, it's like grave robbing. But finally, in a court battle, they tested it, and in fact, it is not. It's Caucasian, not related to the current tribes. And what I was going to get to is, do you suspect that these burial mounds that people call Indian burial mounds that have, according to the reports, lots of these giants, these bones of giants, are going to turn out to not be related to Native American tribes?
I think that some of them will be and some of them won't be, because I think there'll be some hybridization. So I think it'll come down to individuals. I think some of them will not be and some will. That's my honest opinion. I think that it would be interesting to test the sample you just talked about for nuclear DNA, because that would also shed some light on things. Once again, if it was a regular size individual or was it a larger size individual?
No, regular size. So it's not a giant. I understand why Native Americans would oppose this kind of testing with what has been done to burial grounds and stuff for a couple of centuries. It's a very sensitive issue, but I suspect that it's going to be a lot of cases where, as you said, it is not related at all.
Did they get a date on how old the remains were?
11,000 years, I think.
Okay, we have Native American remains that are older than that. I actually wrote a short scientific paper on it that you can find at slahal.org, SLAHAL.org.
Tell me this.
There are coprolites that are older than that.
Tell me the story about the Dogman sample. We're going to go to a break. We got about 4 minutes or so. So in that time, the Dogman sample, the circumstances of how it was obtained, and where you stand with it.
Okay, the Dogman sample was kind of shelved. We had done preliminary testing on it. Like you gave the story at the first of the show, the hair was morphologically more canine looking. It was definitely non-human hair. It was fur hair. It was the underneath coat. It was not very long, and it was pretty fine. And when we extracted it, we washed it thoroughly to make sure there was no contamination, of course. And then we lumped it in with some of the Bigfoot samples and sent it out for testing, and it came back with human mitochondrial DNA, 100% human, off of hair that's more canine-like. I mean, I'm not going to say it was because it wasn't totally like it, but it was definitely not like the rest of the Sasquatch hair, much finer and shorter. And so I'm thinking we're having the same type of... The only two things I can come up with, there's a lot of Native American stories about shamans that can actually change into animals.
Yeah. Shapeshifter, skinwalker.
Yes, exactly. You know a lot about that.
I do.
And with that in mind, I feel the test results will either come out 100% human if those Native American stories are true, and if not, then I think we're going to have another individual thing that's more like Bigfoot, because you're going to have your human mito with your unknown mixed with human on the other side. Now, let me make this abundantly clear, that humans and dogs can't mate, okay? Humans
Yes.
and wolves can't mate. So I don't know what we're going to find, but I'm very curious since we got the human mitochondrial DNA, and it was not contaminated. We screened it to be sure of that. It was very clean, and so it will be very interesting, and I just hope we have enough DNA left to do a good job with it and get, our answers on that sample, because it is a very compelling sample since it was an eyewitness account. And there are several types of these creatures, by the way. There's those that look kind of like a Bigfoot, except that they have more of a snout on them. Some people say it looks like a baboon. Others say it looks like a dog or a wolf. And then, there's several variants of this. From what I understand and what I've seen one personally, and it looked like a giant wolf, and there's no wolves around here. So, there's those that look more like a wolf and those that look more like a person with a wolf's head. So it's interesting it's going to be very interesting to see how this tests out. We're nearly there on the funding for that one, so we'll make it. And we'll get that one tested too.
You go down this road, Melba. I mean, you're never going to get that paper published that says,
I'm
by the way,
I'm just going to put it out on the internet, let people see what we got.
It makes you wonder if the DNA results come back and show canine and human mixed somehow, and that there is, reports of these kind of creatures roaming around, you have to believe they're from somewhere else.
Well, face it, there have been reports of them through history. Look at the god, the Egyptian god that has basically the dog's head and the human body. That's pretty much dead on to a lot of the reports. People are going to draw whatever conclusion. They're going to say alien. They're going to say Nephilim. They're going to say a lot of things if it turns out that way. And who am I to argue? I just don't know. We're going to put it out there and do the science and let people draw their own conclusions.
How's the money going? You raised some money through crowdsourced
funding,
I think,
enough
to do some tests.
4 or 5 genomes, which is great. But we're kind of waiting on this Dogman. It's not quite funded yet. And the other thing is, I was hoping we could get some heavy-duty funding to come in from somewhere that would actually, what we'll get with the genomes is we'll get the basics, and we'll get basically a percentage human. But past that, for the bioinformatics, to really get the phylogenetic trees and all, we need, to raise more to do that. And I'm hoping that, somebody will have an interest and step forward, because, we can get an awful lot done for, $50,000 or less. The last study cost $500,000. That's 1/10. So, but I don't like to do crowdfunding for that much because, people that give crowdfunding, they really don't have that kind of money to throw away. And as far as, it's not throwing it away. I don't mean it that way. I mean it that,
But it's not food and rent.
Donated.
Right.
And I feel bad about that. I would like to have somebody who has money that they can throw away in any way they want
Right.
to fund this, because I think it's a much better way, somebody who's interested and, wants to be a part of it.
Dr. Melba Ketchum is my guest. When we come back, we open up the phone lines with your comments and questions. Tom Petty takes us into the break on Coast to Coast AM. Well, this song will give you goosebumps. Haunting melody from Sarah McLachlan from 1997. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum, a DNA analyst and intrepid researcher, about some pretty interesting samples that she's been analyzing in search of evidence of giants, as well as other entities. When we come back, we open up the phone lines. A lot of folks already standing by to ask some questions and make some comments. We'll get right to it on Coast to Coast AM. We go to the phones with your questions and comments from my guest, Dr. Melba Ketchum. First-time caller, Joey in Texas. You're on Coast to Coast.
Yes, how you doing tonight?
All right, what's on your mind?
Well, I was in Florida last year for Bike Week. I traveled and I took tactical gear, and I happened to see this gentleman with this Bigfoot in a box that he was showing the audience. You have to pay to go in there and look at it. Well, the gentleman, his name was Rick Dyer, and he bought a knife from me, and then I started questioning about the Bigfoot, and I started chatting with him as a friend, kind of, and throughout the show, and I went in there and I saw this Bigfoot he kept in a box. He said he shot it, and I went in there to see this thing. It's awfully large, and he told me a story. It was just he and I by ourselves in there at the time. It was later on in the evening, and I was asking him, I'm like, come on, man, tell me the truth. And he sincerely believed that he shot the Bigfoot, and I was wondering if they've done any research on this thing, or have anybody done any diagnose. He said he sent it to Washington to have it studied, and then he finally got it back, and that's why he's able to show it. So he goes throughout the nation, and he gets people to go see this thing, and I was just wondering about that, if any research has been done on this.
Well, I hope you didn't spend a lot of money on it, Joey. Melba, you want to take this one?
Well, he came out himself, Dyer did, and said it was a hoax, that, the body was fake. So there's no testing, there's no Bigfoot body.
It's not the first time he's done it, too, Joey.
No, it's not. 2008.
It really kind of hurts the field when you got a guy like that who obviously is just trying to, well, I'm not even going to go into it, but he's trotted this stuff out before, and it's always turned out to be a hoax. So thanks for the call. Wildcard line, Jeff in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hi, Jeff. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Good morning, George.
Howdy.
Got a question. Comment. There was supposedly some bodies, Bigfoot bodies, taken after the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. And I was wondering if she's got any comment on that.
Melba?
There were enough eyewitness accounts that it's probably valid. There's a lot of stories about bodies out there. Almost all of them end in basically a cover-up with them disappearing. And some of them are very credible stories.
Thank you, Jeff, for the call. So it's a lot of. Has anybody come up with any samples from Mount St. Helens area?
No, that was years ago.
I have a hard time with it, Melba, figuring out why cover this one up. Why hide evidence that I can see maybe Bigfoot, but the giant part of it. We're not freaked out by.
It doesn't fit the normal paradigm, scientific paradigm. For one thing, it supports old beliefs that are not popular anymore. It also it could rewrite history to a large extent, and nobody wants to deal with that. They would rather everything just stay the same, and anything that's outside the normal paradigm is going to be dealt with.
Well, it's a pretty big cover up if you're hiding all those bones that we're going to talk about in the next segment.
Of course. They're hiding Bigfoot bodies too. I know that. I mean, I've had government people tell me that. and
You know
people
where-
that I trust.
You know where they are?
My guess would be under the Smithsonian, but I don't know. I know where they're not.
They're not traveling around Florida in a box.
Oh,
Thanks.
not hardly.
Thanks, Jeff. We're going to go to Wayne in Chicago. Hi, Wayne. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Good morning to the best show in the history of the world.
What's on your mind?
Yes, I have two questions. The first one is, I would like the doctor to repeat that website that she gave out. And also, I want to know if she know anything about when our troops were over in Afghanistan and they cornered a giant in a cave, and he killed a lot of our troops, and they finally killed him. I want to know if the government actually, well, she may know if the government took his body and maybe if they researched it. Of course, they're not going to tell us anything, but I just want to know if she knows anything about that. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks, Wayne.
I've been told confidentially by a couple of sources that was a real story. I don't know because I don't personally have knowledge. I just know what I was told. It could be completely false, and I know the government is not going to give it up, as far as if it happened. As far as the website, it's the Sasquatch, that's SASQUATCH, genome, GENOME, project.org, O-R-G. That's where the paper is, and it's got other links. It's got credentials. It's got the scientists involved. It's got extra proof that wasn't in the paper. It's got pictures. It's got everything. So those of you that are interested in the Sasquatch, and if they're potentially related to the giants, have fun.
You've made some videos. You have a YouTube channel?
Yes, it's Dr. Melba Ketchum, and I have a number of videos on there. I have one with, like I say, addressing the contamination issue. I got tired of people saying it, so I put since the journals wouldn't ask for the proof, I put it out there so they could see how I know they were not contaminated, how the samples were not contaminated. First of all, I also have a interesting little video that's a clip from a French documentary where Dr. Tom Gilbert from the University of Copenhagen actually tested mitochondrial DNA on the orang pendek. They had some alleged orang pendek hairs, and he also got human DNA from those orang pendek hairs. They had a hair analyst on there also that says it was definitely non-human hair. As Dr. Gilbert also points out, the people over there had black hair, and these were bright red. So non-human hair, once again, given human results, human mitochondrial results. Regrettably, there was not enough DNA. He didn't do any nuclear testing. I wish he had. What I found really amusing, and you'll see this in the video, is that he actually was attacked by the hair analyst, which was not related to him, that said, "Oh, they must not have worn gloves, or they must not have worn, they must have may have dripped sweat in it, and human contamination." And I had to laugh because Tom Gilbert's published over 125 peer-reviewed papers, some of which have to do with ancient remains. I mean, his lab is one of the best in the world, and they're sitting there calling him contamination. If I was him, I would have been so angry. I mean, but I had to, commiserate with him, and I know how he feels because we got the same thing.
Yeah, it has to be something else. It can't be what the results show. It has to be some screw-up somewhere.
Right, exactly. That's what they'll all say, but it's not true. I know he didn't mess up. I know we didn't mess up. The university labs that tested some of the same alleged Sasquatch samples before we did, they didn't mess up. They just didn't believe the results that they got. Because they got same sequence results we did on the mitochondrial DNA, and it was human. And also on the YouTube channel, I got to say, I've got trailers for a couple of my books. I've written some books having to do with Native American legend and on Sasquatch, and I put it in a story form. It's going to be a series of 4 or 5 books. And if you're a male, you probably won't like them because they're written more like the Twilight series. But there's a lot of truthful information in there about lore around the Sasquatch and some of the supernatural things that they allegedly can do. So it's for fun. it was a decompression that I did after all the stress of the study. So there's trailers on there. But
it's a good outlet.
If you're a teenager and you're a girl, you'll probably love them.
All right. Well, we have links on the Coast page if anybody wants to check that out. East of the Rockies, Lonnie in Newport, North Carolina. Hi, Lonnie. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Good evening, George and Melba. I think I might be able to help clear up a couple of those stories. The Art Bell had I believe it was Stephen Quayle on one night, and he had an interview with a guy they called the pilot, and that was all about the Afghanistan incident with the giant.
Oh, yeah?
And apparently this guy was a pilot for one of the big cargo planes, and or I think it might have even been the jet. And he told the story about how he didn't know what he was picking up or delivering all the time, but he went into this warehouse to pick up this pallet that had the giant on it, and it did have 6 fingers and 6 toes. And it stretched from the corner of the pallet to the other corner of the pallet. And I believe they're 9 foot by 9 foot, something like that. But anyway, the main reason I called was Ed Dames has told in the past with Art Bell what the Bigfoot was, what the skunk ape was, what the little gray alien was, and what the chupacabra was. And Ed Dames, which I trust his science and what he says, and he said that they were physical projections made out of real elements from a machine underground on Mars. And then later he said that they were probably on spaceships too. And so if you look at the evidence, one of the things about the Bigfoot is that they found tracks in the snow that just ended way out in the country. And the Native Americans, some of them say that Bigfoot are visible and invisible. So you have to include all that evidence. And if you look at what the gray aliens are doing, abducting people, taking samples, that's probably why you get human DNA on the Bigfoot.
Well, I'm wondering how a physical projection leaves anything behind, any kind of DNA or anything.
Well, if the hairs got off on a tree or whatever, and find evidence that way, and who knows if they can be actually killed, if they are able to. What Ed Dames said was that, Art Bell asked him basically what happens when they disappear. Well, the switch on the machine just turns off. And if you think of the Star Trek technology of the replicator, you can have a spaghetti dinner and a Romulan ale, and then transporter. And if you had a computer program on it that's embedded in the physical projection, which it's in our science fiction, so maybe it's true.
All right, Lonnie, thank you. That's a lot to chew on there. Thank you for calling and bringing us up to date on that pilot story, and also on Ed Dames. I guess the problem would be in testing that kind of a story, that kind of an idea, physical projection.
Well, like I say, they definitely have physical form, or we wouldn't have had DNA. And they can be killed because we, had one that was in the study. If any of that is true, and I'm not going to address anything supernatural, I know I have seen things I can't explain about them. I will go that far in my field experience. But they definitely are physical beings, at least
sometime.
They are, and you can get DNA from them. And they are able to be killed too.
All right, appreciate that call. Try to get one more in. West of the Rockies, Tony in Livingston, Montana. Hi, Tony. You're on with Melba.
Hi, George. Hi, Melba.
Howdy.
Hi.
I can't believe I got through. I've tried to get through for years.
Here you go.
Your program really jogged my mind. Back in the early 90s, I worked for Little Bighorn Battlefields on the Crow Indian Reservation. And apparently in the early 60s, during the initial construction of the Yellowtail Dam in Bighorn Canyon National Recreation Area, some of the older Crow people were telling me that the construction was stopped, caves were found, and large wooden boxes were taken out by the government, and these guys had no idea what was found or what was taken away. And I've never heard anybody say anything about that, and just listening to your program, it just jogged my memory, and I went, what did they find there?
That sounds like a pretty good mystery. I don't know if it's boxes. Well, maybe the government brought the boxes in and boxed up whatever it is they found, as opposed to boxes were already there in the cave. Does this ring a bell with you, Melba?
That's the impression I got.
Not at all. I haven't heard this.
The Crow people said that stuff was being taken out, and they had no idea because I guess everything kind of shut down, and it was all kept secret. And I was always curious, and I hadn't thought about it for years until I was listening tonight. And I went, whoa, maybe something was going on there as far as the giants.
So that's the feeling, though, that you got. What they were taking out on the boxes, or just a sense from the Crows that maybe it was remains of some sort, as opposed to gold nuggets?
Oh, yes. That was the impression I got, totally, yes.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting story. Thanks for sharing that. Maybe that's something that's worth checking out. And if anybody in the audience, any members of the Crow tribe or anybody who lives in that area that's ever heard that story before, send me an email. I'd like to know more about it. Thanks, Tony, for that call. Melba, so this is, in the end, this is a mystery that actually can be solved with with a little bit of funding and a little bit of elbow grease.
Right. I mean, we've already got a good start on the funding. We exceeded our goal. But like I say, it was hardworking people in increments, and it took us 6 months to do it. But I'm so thankful for those people. I really am. But I don't like the thought of taking food off of anybody's table. If we can get some larger funding that, where it won't hurt the individual in any way like that, because I know how hard money is to come by these days with this economy.
Well, it certainly is a lot less expensive than it was, 10 years ago to do something like this.
Oh, yes, but I mean, as far as people, donating to the cause.
Right.
It's appreciated more than you know, because we can learn so much from our origins if we can just get. I want to get all of them done, not just a few of them. But if we don't get the funding, I'll do what we've got the money to do, and it will help at least. But the hardest part is trying to decide which samples to actually run and which ones to put off if we don't get extra funding. Well,
sounds like that dog man sure would be at the top of my list.
Well, we only like $500 on the dog man. That'll come.
You know what? I might help you with that one myself.
Sounds like
Sounds like your spirits are good, Melba. I'm glad to hear it because, you're taking some lumps, but you're dishing it right back out.
Well, I understand the motives these people have, and frankly, if they have so much time to worry about little old me, then, they don't have a life, and I feel sorry for them. So, there's no point addressing people like that or getting in the middle of anything. It's just, I do my thing, and I don't care what other people do. I don't even read the criticism at all. I just stay away from all of it. I stay away from the Bigfoot world for the most part, and I'm much happier for it.
Well, that's a good attitude to have. I hope you'll keep me in the loop about what's going on, and we'll have you back again.
Absolutely. I've got a little more information. I'll be emailing you shortly.
Okay. And, keep us in the loop, and then when you've got some more test results, we'll come back and have you on the program again.
Okay. Yeah, next time we'll have some results, because it won't take that long once we do it. I'm kind of waiting on on the dogman sample and see if we can come up with a little more funding so I don't have to make such tough decisions to call out the samples.
All right, Dr. Melba Ketchum, always good to talk to you. Thank you. Coming up, Richard Dewhurst to talk about his book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. Some pretty interesting stories, and a lot of them, coming up here on Coast to Coast AM. A whimsical number from Abbey Road, 1969, Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I want to mention the song that went into the break. And we do like to mention and give a shout-out to the artists we use for our bumper music, because they do contribute to help make the show what it is. That was Joe Walsh, All Night Long, which could sort of be our theme song for this program. The great Joe Walsh, I should say, and I mention him especially because he's a regular listener to the program, and every once in a while he'll call in. He doesn't announce that he's Joe Walsh, but he does, so we're glad to have him as part of the Coast to Coast family. Got a little situation here, folks. We're supposed to have Richard Dewhurst come on the program to talk about his book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. Mr. Dewhurst is nowhere to be found. We're calling his number, and it doesn't work. So, Richard, if you are listening to this program, your phone is busted and doesn't work. We're trying to call it, and you're not answering. If you're a neighbor of Richard Dewhurst, or you got an email address for him, you might want to send him a note or go bang on his door and tell him he's supposed to be on a coast-to-coast radio show right now to talk about his book. In the meantime, Dr. Melba Ketchum has agreed to stick around for a while. There were a whole bunch of people on the phone lines with questions for her, and she has graciously agreed to stick around and answer your questions. And we ran the numbers again, so if you want to call in and talk to Dr. Ketchum about Bigfoot or DNA research or the pursuit of evidence for giants, she's going to be here for a while. So anyway, sorry about this situation, and we'll still talk to Richard Dewhurst if he can find a different phone that works. But in the meantime, we'll be talking to Melba right after this break on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Melba Ketchum, long time no talk. Thanks for sticking around.
This was unexpected.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of people who were on the phones who wanted to talk to you anyway, so it's good. It's good with me.
So let's get on with it.
All right. I'll tell you what. Let's go to our first-time caller list. Doug in Cincinnati. Hi, Doug. You're on with Dr. Ketchum.
Hey, I'm going to talk real fast because I got a lot of stuff I want to get in. But
all right.
First, Dr. Ketchum, is that your name?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to give you, just keep doing what you're doing because of a personal experience I had in 2005. Forget what the naysayers say to you. They do exist. Bigfoots do exist, and you already have the DNA proof to prove it. All you need is the funding to shut all the people up. Secondly, people always talk about, getting photographic and film evidence. I'm a graduate of like broadcasting school, so I studied video and audio, all facets of broadcasting. And before I say anything, could anybody confirm, has the Patterson film ever been officially debunked?
No. There's people that have tried, but there's always something else that makes it where they just can't do it.
Because I studied that extensively in broadcasting school, and people don't know, like, what a gold mine the Patterson film is for a couple of different reasons. One, people don't know that it was shot in 16 millimeter, and to this day, that is one of the best video formats ever shot on. Like, in terms of like video enhancement, it doesn't lose like really any pixelation. So when you blow up the Patterson film, you see things that you really just have to see it to believe. Like, you can see this thing's gender. I mean, I won't go into detail, but you know
can.
what. And
have you noticed the muscle hernia on the thigh?
Yes,
and whenever she moves, that's not a suit. That's a muscle hernia.
Well, I can prove it for another reason. That film was shot in 1968. Okay, let's go back in 1968. Now, if that was a person in a suit, that suit was state of the art. So, what was state of the art in 1968? You got to go Hollywood. It's always cutting edge special effects. So, the two movies that I refer to that was released in 1968 were The Planet of the Apes and 2001: Space Odyssey. Now, what I saw in the Patterson film did not look like Roddy McDowall. And
no.
Okay, so that's my proof right there. And just a little word based on the experience that I saw with my Bigfoot sighting, that I hear Bigfoot researchers, they talk about how they're going to find Bigfoot. And I wouldn't advise looking for Bigfoot, but if anybody is, I can tell you they're going about the wrong way. And I can really tell you. If a person is looking for Bigfoot, all you got to do is follow the deer, and eventually you will see a Bigfoot.
Hey, Doug, I appreciate your input. I want to mention about the Patterson film. Last week, someone sent me a stabilized version of the film. It's they've done some work on it. Didn't change the content except making it easier to watch. We posted it on the Coast to Coast website. I can probably find it again, but it's really impressive. And I know there are a lot of stories, a lot of attempts by people over the years to discredit it, but I think it's withstood the criticism so far. Thanks for the comments there. Appreciate it. We're going to go west of the Rockies, Bing in Arizona. You're on with Dr. Ketchum.
Hello.
Howdy.
Yes, I've seen a Bigfoot in the southern Sierra Nevadas, and an article in the Tucson paper in 1967, summer of 1967, mentioned about 5 giant skeletons found in the Reddington Pass area, which would be in the Rincon Mountains east of Tucson. And the people who put out the article was Ripley's, believe it or not.
Yeah, I think that is mentioned in Richard Dewhurst's book that we were going to talk about, except for he got lost somewhere. Fairly current cases that are reported in mass media, in major newspapers. There are a bunch of them. I mean, as I mentioned in the introduction, New York Times, and is that part of what got you going, Melba, to get interested in this stuff?
No, it was the Sasquatch stuff that got me interested. But then once I kind of stuck my toe in the water with the giants, it was very interesting because I did go and read all those articles, and there's literally hundreds of them, where remains have been found, and, that are way larger than any human was living back, in those times.
Yeah, and as I said, there are dozens and dozens of reports from all over the country. It's not like all of these newspapers are making this stuff up, but in each of those cases, it seems like the Smithsonian shows up, takes control of the bones, and then that's the last anybody hears of them.
Same with the Bigfoot bodies.
Have you ever had direct dealings with Smithsonian? Have you said, hey, have you got some?
I haven't. I don't think they would be very sympathetic to my cause. Face it, it's just well known throughout the Bigfoot community about, these cover-ups. And I know it's got to be because, they exist. I've seen them with my own eyes. I'm talking Sasquatch here. And, the government obviously knows more than one little person knows. And I'm not even talking science. I'm talking about physically seeing them. And, but yet there's this huge wave of disinformation out there. You get the occasional government employee that will admit to such. I actually confronted one, and bless his heart, he didn't lie. I said, you got bodies? He says, not here. I said, yeah, but you got them. And he says, well, I can't really talk to you about that. So, it happens. And I had a scientist from another country contact me also, and even explained, that they were actually doing some research on them, and that he had worked for that country's, I guess you could call it their Area 51, their covert scientific things, and he was talking about what they knew and that my genomes were right, and what they were doing. And everything he said was what I already knew, so I know he had the knowledge.
Is Bing still on the line, or is he gone? He's gone. The guy, Doug, the caller from Cincinnati, had mentioned, there's ways you can find Bigfoot, you can follow the deer. Have you've had encounters, Melba?
Yeah, they'll come to you if they like you.
Is there
if they pick
some
up
sort
that you're not a threat and what have you? I went out with habituators the first time I saw them, and they just came right up. I had good sightings, and then they also came out at a lease I have down here, and I've seen them both in daylight and after dark, and it's been a fun trip with them. Some of the books, the stories in the books came from some of my field research with them. I don't call it field research; it's just playing with them, kind of. I consider them friendlies, and I have an affection for them. I can't help it. There's been some fun interaction.
I know when you see these stories, you have a visceral reaction when you read these stories about hunters who are bragging about how they want to go out and bag one.
I'm not fond of hunters anyway, unless they're hunting for food. I can understand if they hunt for food, but there's no other reason to hunt, in my opinion. Hunting for sport is vile. And I'm sure some people won't like that, but I don't care.
And hunting a Bigfoot for sport.
Well, that's another type of human. That's murder, homicide.
Let's go back to the phone lines. East of the Rockies, Ben in Chicago. Hi, Ben. You're on Coast to Coast AM. What's on your mind? Ben's gone? All right. How about Barry in Florida on the wild card line?
Hi. Hello, George. Great work, as always. And Dr. Melba, I wanted to remind George that your last show with Mr. Politis, the little girl that was found said, "Doggy ate my hat." And Dr. Melba just mentioned that some of these beings that she had researched looked like a cross between a human and a dog or a wolf. Just wanted to see if you thought that was a possibility. And great work on your part, too, Dr. Melba.
Thank you. I'm sure it's possible. There's too many. I mean, there's more Sasquatch reports than there are Dogman reports, but there are a lot of them out there, and they come from credible people. I'll throw a wrench in it. Just about 10 miles from where I live, there's been sightings of what they call Goat Man. And I know personally people that are of good character, that are pillars of the community, that wouldn't tell a lie if you paid them to, that have seen this thing. So there's weird stuff out there. And I'm not attempting to explain any of this away. I'm just saying that, you know, I don't discount people's stories anymore, because I didn't used to believe in Bigfoot. And when I got the DNA proof, that blew my mind, but it really got blown when I actually saw them. And so if they exist, then other things probably exist also. And knowing the people personally, and we're talking lots of people have seen this thing, you know, it's just not a stretch anymore. We don't live in the world we think we do. It's just that simple.
I've told this story before. Thank you for the call, Barry. I've told the story before. I think I might have shared it with you, Melba, the first time we met in person, about something that happened on the ranch in Utah, this ranch that was studied by the Bigelow National Institute for Discovery Science. My colleague Colum and I co-wrote a book about called Hunt for the Skinwalker, and one of the strangest stories, it was the only story that we considered leaving out of the book because it was so darn weird. We thought it was going to cast aspersions on the rest of the material. It was an incident reported by 2 Native American police officers who had come around the bend at night, and the headlights from their car caught 2 images on the dirt road leading into the ranch. It was 2 figures, standing up, wearing trench coats. They were smoking cigarettes, and they were looking in the direction of the ranch. These officers see these figures. They get out of the car, and they kind of look at each other, and the figures' faces turn around, and they're dogs. It's dog faces smoking cigarettes. The 2 officers are shocked. They looked at each other, turned back around, and they're gone. These figures are gone. They did find cigarette butts still lit in the dirt right where these figures had been seen, so they weren't imagining it. It's almost as if whatever this thing is, maybe it's many different things, that it can assume different shapes and just messes with us.
Well, I wish somebody had kept the cigarette butts. We sure could have gotten the DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what to make of that stuff. You can't.
I don't either. I mean, as a scientist, it's all fantasy to me, but, you know, when you see things you can't explain, you just don't know what to say.
Let's go to Will in Madison, Wisconsin. Hi, Will. You're on with Dr. Ketchum.
Oh, thank you for taking my call. When the Russian Slavs first began to migrate north into the land of the white Muromo Finn tribe, who were the indigenous natives in the Moscow area, they saw that they were tall, blonde. They had one of these tall, blonde giants in chains, and he spoke a tongue of the natives which they didn't understand. And also, there's an interesting book. So if you put in Google white Indians and scroll down just a little bit, you'll come to the politics of white Indians. Very interesting. There were white blondes in both northern part of Europe and in the Americas. But the racism has been so bad against whites, especially big, giant whites, that it is just hideous. For example, when the Russians went into Estonia, they put all the healthy, really big Estonians, put them in the train cars, boxcars, and sent them to Siberia, never to be seen again. They only left in Estonia the smaller people who weren't very as strong. They were healthy, bright and everything, but that's the racism against larger people, especially if they're white blonde, has been hideous throughout the world, and I need to bring that out because we always think that, the whites are the ones who are the racist against dark pigment. No. In the past, it's been the other way around. In fact, it's been so bad that even when the Gauchis, they were rather large, blonde in Canary Islands there, they were made extinct by darker pigmented people. And the whites probably were involved in building the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And if you look, for example, in the Encyclopedia Britannica, the etiology of the word pyramid, they don't know what it is. I was fortunate to learn Finnish as a child. It's my mother language along with English. Pyramid is pyörä, wheel, mitta, measure. And that's what it means. It's a stone clock that measured the rate of rotation of the night star patterns. All 12 of them, takes 25,920 years for all.
Hey, Will,
of them.
we're getting way kind of off the path here. If you want to bring it back around.
The point is that the whites, there were whites a long time ago, and they've just been treated in an inhumane way.
Let's hear from Dr. Ketchum on that. I guess it would, Melba, it would make, there's enough racism to go around in all directions, but I guess it would make sense that...
What we're talking about doesn't have anything to do with racism. It just has to do with, what was here when and what are they? And, if there were Caucasian-type people here longer than, pre-Clovis, then eventually it'll come out as long as we can get some remains to test.
What I was going to ask is whether or not there would have been reasons for Native Americans, indigenous tribes, to go ahead and kill off some tribe of really big people, regardless of the color of their skin or whatever. There might be all kinds of reasons for them to get rid of them or fear them.
Like the red-headed giants, they were cannibalizing the children. I mean, if that's not a good reason to kill, I don't know what is.
Right. We're going to go back to the phone lines after this break. Melba, I saw one little article that had been written about you. It says, is Dr. Melba Ketchum extracting DNA from a giant toddler's skull? Do you know what that one's about? A Peruvian mummy, I think, maybe?
Yeah, that's one of the elongated skull, and we have DNA. We have some preliminary results on that. They were human, but there was some. We just did some screening on that with the regular forensic panel, and we did have some dropout, and we did have some, alleles that are not as common. So it'll be real interesting to be able to actually get a genome on that one.
How many of those do you have, these skulls?
Oh, we've got better than 10 samples of elongated skulls. We have a lot of them.
Are they all from Peru, or are they all over the place?
No, they're from Peru.
And
they're quite remarkable. I'll put it that way. We have, I have pictures, and the skull morphology is just not the same as ours. And using a headboard isn't going to do that.
Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit on the other side, then we'll go back to the phone lines. A lot of folks hanging on with questions for Dr. Melba Ketchum. If you're just tuning in, Richard Dewhurst was supposed to be here, but he's kind of missing in action. So if you run into him, tell him he was supposed to be on the radio. We'll be back with more in just a bit. We were trying to figure out rock songs about giants. Couldn't find many, but we came up with this one from a country song from Travis Tritt, talking about guys who are 10 feet tall. We all know people like that who think they're giants when they belt back a few cocktails or something. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum about her research into Bigfoot DNA, giant DNA, and apparently you folks are fine with the fact that Richard Dewhurst is a no-show because the phone lines are full. When we come back, we'll jump right back into it with my guest here on Coast to Coast AM. Here's a headline from the New York Times, February 11th, 1902. The headline reads, New Mexico discovery, 12-foot giant found. And the text says, owing to the discovery of the remains of a race of giants in Guadalupe, New Mexico, archaeologists are preparing an expedition further to explore the region. This determination is based on the excitement that exists among the people of a scope of country near Mesa Rica, about 200 miles southeast of Las Vegas, New Mexico, where an old burial ground has been discovered that's yielded skeletons of enormous size. Some of these skeletons 12 feet in length. Melba, that's the New York Times reporting that. I mean, where are those bones, and how can you seriously think that the Times made that story up? I mean, I just don't know what to make of reports like that, and there are a whole bunch of them.
Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. I mean, they obviously exist. I mean, and I've got, like I say, skeletal remains from giants. So, and they were not easily obtained, and actually, we had some kickback from the museum where we got the samples. Even they tried to say I didn't have them. I furnished them proof I did, and then they claimed they didn't have the donation that was made to get their cooperation. So, I mean, there's obviously something trying to cover something up, and I think it's because it's, like I said, I'll repeat, it's outside the normal paradigm, and not only that, you have, these things do not fit so easily in evolution. At least the Sasquatch didn't, and I don't expect they will either. And that's the accepted thing that's taught in school these days as to our origins. And if it bucks against what's standard, it isn't very well received.
Well, I'll tell you, the Coast listeners seem happy to have you here for an extended period because the phone lines are full. We're going to east of the Rockies, Barry in South Carolina. Hi, Barry. You're on with Dr. Ketchum. What's on your mind?
Hello there, George. How are you, buddy? It's good old Barry in South Carolina.
Good to hear from you.
Okay, listen, one quick comment, then I got a good question for Melba.
Okay.
But listen, George, when you come streaking out of the Mojave Desert like a Scirocco, what is a Scirocco?
It's a hot desert wind. A hot desert
All
wind.
All right. Okay, because I love your intro. Do you have to read that each time, or do you have it memorized by now?
Yeah, I've pretty much got it down by now. Different variations of it, sure.
Yeah. Okay, listen, hey, Melba, you sound like you might be from down south. Where are you from?
I'm from Texas.
Okay, that's about as far as you can get without going into Mexico. But listen, here, George, you might know something about this too. I'm sure y'all might remember Andre the Giant. He was a big professional wrestler with Hulk Hogan and those back in the 80s and 90s. I was lucky enough to meet him down in Tampa, Florida. Anyway, wonderful man, but he was a giant that looked like a deformed type of giant. He was 7 feet tall or something, over 7 feet. And I was wondering if they'd ever done any DNA tests on him, his blood or whatever, to see if he was some kind of relation to something else besides just plain Homo sapiens. Anyway, I'll go ahead and hang up, George. Great show. Keep it up, buddy. Love you to death. See you.
All right, thanks, Barry. Thanks. That's an interesting question. Andre the Giant, he had something genetically going on, didn't he?
Oh, it appeared to. I'm not aware of any testing. It's kind of a shame. I tell you who I'd really like to get some DNA on is that Russian fighter. I mean, that guy is huge and has the most pronounced brow ridge I've probably ever seen, even more so than Andre the Giant. And he's now gone into politics, but anybody that sees that man, he's amazing to look at.
I guess the tallest human was a guy named, or American anyway, Robert Pershing Wadlow, sometimes called Alton the Giant or the Giant of Illinois. He was 8 feet 11 inches and weighed 490 pounds. He looks like, if you've ever seen a picture of him, he kind of looks like an accountant. He doesn't look like Andre the Giant.
And I believe he probably had a pituitary tumor.
Right.
I believe he died pretty young, if I remember correctly. If we're thinking the same article.
We sort of touched on this earlier very briefly, but I mean, that's an important distinction you need to make in digging into these kind of things to make sure that the sample that you're looking at isn't the result of an understandable and explainable human condition, right?
Yes, and back decades ago, there wasn't surgery to treat these giants that had the pituitary tumors, so they usually died fairly young, in their 20s and what have you. That's one way you can look at. If you have skeletal remains and you have a skull, you can, if the teeth are well worn and it's an older skull, appears to have some wear on it, chances are, if it was a giant skull, it's not going to be from a pituitary tumor because it should have already passed.
Is that the kind of thing that you'd have a whole family of people that would have that kind of a condition?
No, not at all.
I'm referring to sort of these Indian burial mounds where you've got 8, 9, 10 of them.
Whole families. I thought you meant with the pituitary tumor if it was inherited.
Well, yeah, I do mean that, but I mean as an explanation for when you've got a burial mound with 8 or 9 people and they're all over 7 feet tall, they don't all have a pituitary problem.
No, that's the point. That's what makes them real giants. Is because, you're not going to find a group of people with pituitary tumors. You're going to find one here and one there.
West of the Rockies, Richard in Salem, Oregon. Hi, Richard. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Good evening, George.
Howdy.
Good evening, George and Doctor. I believe you said that there was a Bigfoot body that the DNA came from in your study?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Are the photographs available of that? The body?
No, not of the body.
Why not?
Don't really want to go into that because there's been a lot of discussion over that, and that's for another time. Let's just say that the body was not recovered, but a piece of tissue was.
Okay, but anyone with a cell phone would have had a camera. Also, you went out with some folks to see Bigfoot. Are your photographs available?
I don't make my photographs available. I have some, but I don't make them available because all you get is, and I'll tell you why. I have no problem saying why I don't put out what I have. The reason is that, like we were talking about all the discussion about the Patty film, the Patterson-Gimlin film, there are still a lot of people that just get very hateful and say it's faked, and the same with the Erickson footage, which is fantastic footage, and it's absolutely real. And people say, oh, it's just a Chewbacca mask, whenever I've got genetic proof it's not, because the physical features match the DNA that I ran on it. Plus, it has a black tongue, and people don't have black tongues. And that particular gene is not easily, it's not been sequenced because it's very different.
Well, Richard, let her finish. Let her finish for a second, and then we'll come back to you, okay? Hold on.
So I don't release my stuff. My field research and my discussions with habituators and what I know about them is vast, but I'm not going to go public with it because it gets into arguments just like this, and it's not worth it. I mean, I'm a scientist, and my primary thrust is DNA testing. I'm an expert at that, so that's where I try to stick mostly with what I'm an expert in. And, what I do as far as my field research and any photographs I have and any information I have, that's for my personal enjoyment.
Richard, what would I guess what would be the point if she did release some photos? Would that constitute proof?
Well, if you're saying you have the DNA, which I'm perfectly open to it. Yeah. You would show a picture of what the DNA came from. That's the scientific method.
We have that, and it's out there. It's on our website. We have a picture of a dark red female Sasquatch, and we have a close-up of her. She's got a bad tooth, she's got a black tongue, she's got red hair. We tested her DNA, and that red hair was a human red hair gene that was in her DNA. So she matches that. She is a female. Okay, so we have more than one video of her. We have one of her sleeping, and you can clearly see she is not male. And there were only 3 females in the study, and she was one of them. Furthermore,
that's wonderful. That if I can go look at them, that's what I was asking for.
Oh, okay. Well, go to SasquatchGenomeProject.org and look at the pictures, and you'll be able to see what one looks like. And we did the DNA on it; it matches her physical appearance. So, very much so. Go enjoy.
Hey, Richard, I think. Thanks for the call. I think what it does is it sort of raises a delicate point in that you can tell that Melba has strong feelings about this because it doesn't really matter what photos or videos are released. They will be attacked, and some people are going to believe them, and some people wouldn't believe them no matter how good they are. That's pretty much what you're saying, right, Melba?
Exactly, and so there's no point in just opening up more cans of worms whenever, the DNA is the DNA, and that's the best proof we have. When it supports a photo like it did in the case of the Erickson sample, then that's fabulous and wonderful because that is real proof.
Those are rare cases, though, where you have a photo to go along with the DNA, right?
Yes, and it took them 5 years to get it because they're wary. They don't want their pictures taken, and it was they worked long and hard to get those photographs.
Do you sort of feel protective? Is that at least part of the reason you wouldn't release something like that?
Part of it is that I am protective of them in a sense. The ones around me, at least. I know there's bad ones out there too, so people need to beware going in the woods. Dave Paulides has a point with his books, and you don't just go out in the woods by yourself. I don't believe, at least, not in these really rural areas, because there's bad ones and there's good ones. But you have to give them the benefit of the doubt, just like any other human being would be given the benefit of the doubt. And hunting them and, all of this controversy, it only serves to tear down the science and to tear down their existence. So, I think that we stick with the science is the best way to go.
Richard, thanks for the call. First-time caller Matthew in Illinois. Hi, Matthew. You're on with Melba.
Hey, how you doing?
All right.
Top of the morning to you guys.
Same to you. What's on your mind?
Okay, well, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. It lives about in the woods, particularly. Where does this being live? I mean, I heard the gentleman speak about the tracks, the Indian, and things like that. It seems kind of primitive as far as we know it, as media and the television portrays. But what would be the ideal habitat for this being to live?
Well, that's a good
They
question.
live in any forested area, although they've been spotted in every state in the Union except Hawaii. So they can live anywhere because they're so good at concealment. But the higher number of sightings occurs where there's thicker woods, more wooded areas, because obviously there's more cover there, and so that's where you'll find them.
And do they have nests? Do they sleep in trees or caves or all of the above, or do you know?
In caves a lot of times, and sometimes in the open. Like some of the video we've got on our SasquatchGenomeProject.org website is this one sleeping in the woods, and there's other places they go that are safe for them. So they're very careful about being found, and they're not that primitive. I can speak from experience on that. But just don't believe what you see on TV. That's why there's been no documentary whatsoever on my part, because I've turned down double digits of them because they want to make them out to be monsters. They want to make them out to be, all this controversy for ratings, and I'm not going to go there with my science because the science is what it is. And, it has to be a production, a documentary that would highlight the people that contributed the samples and their stories. Some of them have good video, and it has to be about, what we proved with the study, not that they're monsters and not that, we're going to go chasing in the woods after them, because that's not going to happen. They don't show up when you chase through the woods after them.
Well, I've seen a lot of these Bigfoot shows. Seems like they're all the same. You get greenish nighttime video and people making noises in the woods and, hey, what was that sound? And sure sounds like a Bigfoot, and we never seems to pay off.
They're not gonna come out for something like that. They will approach people occasionally, and when they do, it's because you're quiet, and they can read you. They have animal instincts as well as human instincts as well as high intelligence, and they know your intentions before you ever even get there.
All right, let's go to Michael in Santa Rosa, California, on the wild card line. Hi, Michael. What's on your mind? We're going to take a break in about 3 minutes, so you might have to carry over depending on the length of your question, but you're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Great. Thank you, George. I want to say, number one, I absolutely love your show. I listen to it. I work night shifts, and I listen to it every night that I'm driving and doing patrols. Dr. Ketchum, I had a couple of questions for you, and I'll make them real fast. Question number one, I heard about the dog man for quite some time. I had a friend in the military from Georgia, told me a little bit about it, and I saw a spoof on it on a Monster Quest. But regarding the Dogman, I was just curious if you might be able to reveal where you got the DNA from. Did it come from finding like a piece of it, or was it the body? And the other question
I had... It was hair from the car that hit it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
It was hair from the car that hit it.
Oh, well, I didn't. I guess I didn't hear that part of the show. I came in right in the middle of it.
That was the very first of the show. George told the story.
Got it.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, it's in a western state at night, a vehicle that collided with something that looked like a dog standing on two legs, though. And
about 1,000 pounds worth from what I was told.
That is impressive. The other question I had really quick is there's a video on the internet. It looks like older footage of a mother and a son in the snow with a snowmobile. Starts off, and later on they're driving in a truck. And they're videoing something they see in the field, and the little boy gets out with the camera to go and look at it, and then the whatever it is looks like a big dog. It rushes them, and there's a lot of controversy and speculation as to whether it's real or whether it's hoaxed. And I was just wondering if you had a chance to look at that footage and what your professional opinion is.
I have not seen it, and I don't comment on other people's stuff like that unless I have personal knowledge, because I'm not a video expert. And I think it would, be wrong for me to, comment on those types of things, because I need to keep it, if, like, I know the Matilda video is real. I've done the testing on the sample, but, and know more about it than the general public knows. But, like, on a YouTube video, I stay away from commenting on them for the most part, because, that's all it is controversy. That's why I don't release my videos or my pictures, because there's always somebody that's going to, say, oh, it's a hoax, and there's always somebody that's going to say, oh, it's real. And so, I can pretty well tell when I look at them, but I won't publicly talk about it.
Michael, did I hear you say you're on patrol?
Yes, actually, I'm over at one of the stops right now. We do a variety of executive protection checks and some of our other assets. I did have one other question, if I can squeeze one in.
You can try. I think we're about to go to the break, though. Go ahead.
Okay, the reality TV show regarding to the Giants with the two guys that go looking for historical. They mentioned once that Abraham Lincoln went someplace because he wanted to see some bones of a giant that were found. Do you guys know anything about that? If that's real?
No, I don't watch that stuff.
I'll tell you this, Michael, is that Abraham Lincoln did write about giants. There's a couple of quotes that if I can find them, I'll read them after the break. But thank you for the call. Appreciate it. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum about her research into DNA, looking for Sasquatch, looking for giants, looking for dogmen, and a variety of other kinds of beings. Interesting stuff. You seem to be interested because the phone lines are still full, and we'll take some calls right after this. The name of this song is Make Me Pure. It's clever stuff, insidious lyrics. It was a hit all over the world except here, so chances are you haven't heard it. It was not played on American radio. I mention it because the artist, Robbie Williams, is sort of one of us. He's a coaster, a coastee. He listens to the program religiously. He probably hears it every night, more often than I do, even when he's out on tour, such as right now. So if you're listening tonight, Rob, howdy from the U.S., and hope you're enjoying Dr. Melba Ketchum, who has agreed to stick around here tonight to talk about giants and Sasquatch and DNA. And the phone lines, as I mentioned before, are pretty much full, and we'll get right back to them after this on Coast to Coast AM. Before the break, someone asked about Abraham Lincoln, if he had written something about giants, and I found the quote. This is something that Lincoln wrote in 1848. He said, "The eyes of that species of extinct giants whose bones fill the mounds of America have gazed on Niagara, as ours do now." Some folks who don't want it to be about giants have come up with other explanations. Maybe he was talking about mammoths or mastodons or something like that, but it sounds to me like he was talking about giants, and, you can put whatever spin you want to on it. Melba, before we go back to the phone lines, I had a thought. If you have DNA samples of a Sasquatch, we posted an article on Coast to Coast on the website tonight about attempts to revive woolly mammoths. Using DNA that they've extracted from remains found at various places. I mean, theoretically, you could grow your own Sasquatch, couldn't you?
Well, it would be a human cloning thing, and I have ethical reservations about that.
Sure.
Plus it's not like live cells, and, the state of the art is that a lot of clones are not exactly viable anyway. So, it might be a little more difficult, but I think it probably could be done. But you would have to use a human ovum and or egg, and I think to insert the DNA into. And I just think that's wrong on so many levels.
That gets into all kinds of different. It just popped into my head during the break, so I was.
Well, it's a good idea, and we've thought about it. And there were rumors that a university was trying to get a sample to do that with, but like I say, I don't know that it would work if they put it in a ape ovum as it is, because they're a type of people, but it just ethically and morally, I think, is repugnant.
Well, somebody will use that as the premise for a monster movie or something. We're going to go back to the phones. Wildcard line, Blair in Sedona. Hi, Blair. Good morning. You're on with Melba Ketchum.
Hi, thanks. I wanted to speculate on Bigfoot's purpose on Earth. My guess is they're custodial agents for the planetary quarantine force that's currently got us in low Earth orbit, George and Dr. Ketchum.
That's a wild one.
Well, why not? She mentioned the psychic awareness that they have and their sensitivities. It reminded me of a Somewhere in Time Art Bell interview with Jim Mars. You might be familiar with this, but they sort of brought that up. It said Art said a little teaser before the break. He said to Jim, he says, "I want to ask about this planet being quarantined." And so, wait for the commercial break, and there's wanted it to happen on Coast to Coast sometimes. Mm-hmm. That question was forgotten after the break. So my question is, quarantine meaning they won't let our space vehicles out of low Earth orbit until we get our act together? Any thoughts, Dr. Ketchum?
Well, first of all, I didn't call them psychic. I just said that, animals can read us too. We can even read each other to an extent. They're just hyper aware. So, first of all, I did not say they were psychic per se. Second,
you're among friends here, Melba. He was just taking liberties with it, I think. So.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I'm a scientist and that's where it needs to stay. As far as what you're talking about, I'm really not into anything to that, but I will refer to Native American legends. And many of the tribes speak of them seeing the Sasquatch when there's a time where either the tribe is doing something wrong and needs to change its course, or in times of danger. They believe that they were here to warn them and help them get back on track. And that's been repeated through many tribes. So, take that for what it is.
Thanks, Blair. Appreciate it. That was an interesting premise. Melba, I think I remember reading in Dave Politis' earlier books, the Bigfoot books, Hoopa Reservation, that some of that stuff came up, what they referred to Sasquatch as a protector and also a harbinger of trouble that might be on the way.
Yes, exactly.
Jeff in Culver City. Good morning, Jeff. How you doing?
Yeah, hi, George again and Mrs. Ketchum. Yeah, in the Bible, it is written in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, "Let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish, the fowl, the cattle, and every creeping thing and that creepeth on the earth." Apparently, the us and our are plural, meaning more than one. So the gods made man in their image, and therefore it seems we are duplicates from molds in miniature form, formed from greater gods. My question is this, Ms. Ketchum. Since we appear to be miniature duplicates made from the images of these gods, all other life forms, including Bigfoots, must be duplicate images of other animals and creatures too, like dinosaurs. Why haven't we found any evidence of these giant Bigfoots or giant animals or giant insects? And I'll take your answer off there.
I'm not really quite understanding your question. We have evidence. We have DNA evidence. We have linked to eyewitness accounts of seeing them. They're a hybrid hominid. They are not in contradiction to the Bible in any way. We in the Bible could also refer to Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, so there's a lot of different ways to interpret this, and that's what it boils down to. A lot of people think they're part aliens. A lot of people think they're Nephilim from the Bible, where the angels mated with the the human women. A lot of people, don't believe in them at all, and others think they're an animal. So there's just everybody's going to have their opinion, and everybody's welcome to their opinion.
Appreciate the call, Jeff. We go back to the wildcard lines. Bill in Hastings, Florida. Good morning, Bill.
Hi, how are you today?
All right.
Great. I've got a couple of things that Dr. Ketchum might be interested in.
Okay.
The first one is a creature called Julia Pastrana, a human called Julia Pastrana, or maybe she was a hybrid. It's hard to say. But back in the 1800s, she was in the Barnum and Bailey Freak Show, and she was completely covered with hair and had a face that looked like it was half human and half ape. And I don't know if she's familiar with this or not, but you can look it up on the internet.
Yes.
It is very interesting. That particular photo is very interesting.
Okay, so you're
but
familiar
without
with
DNA, we can't tie her to Sasquatch for sure.
Okay.
And that's the whole problem with pictures is, if they can be tied to some type of proof, like the Erickson footage was, tied that the physical appearance matched the DNA or something like that, then, that would certainly help with the proof. And that's why we want to test these Russian samples because, they come from a pretty validated story of a hybridization between a wild man or Sasquatch and a human being.
Well, what's
and
interesting
the
with
DNA will support that.
For many years, her remains had disappeared, but recently they had. It had turned out that they were at the University of Oslo in Norway in a medical museum, and just I think in 2013, they were returned to Mexico and buried, and they must have done DNA testing at some point to determine if she was really fully human. But they don't seem to have released the results of the DNA testing, and I was wondering if you know anything about the DNA testing on the remains of Julia Pastrana.
Wow, that's really interesting, Bill.
Do it, and if it turned out like my Sasquatch results, you'll probably never hear of it either.
Hey, Bill, if you have an article on that, would you forward it to me? I'd love to read that.
Actually, on the computer, all you have to do is type in Julia Pastrana. Pastrana, Julia Pastrana, and it'll tell you all about it. And
about the
Pastrana
DNA
means
too?
hairy in Spanish. Apparently, she was found. They thought she was a Digger Indian at one point, but most people seem to have believed that she was actually a hybrid between a human and an ape. And the other one I wanted to mention was: are you familiar with the Ebu Gogo? Have you ever heard the term Ebu Gogo? EBU.
Somewhere, but I'm not pulling it up as far as what I read about it.
It has to do with a creature called Homo floresiensis.
Oh, now
oh,
that,
yeah.
And this Homo floresiensis was a little 3-foot-tall ape man. We call them the Hobbit people. And they lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia. They only went extinct about 14,000 years ago. But they may have gone extinct far more recently than that. Or they may be the same creature that's been reported on some of these other islands like Sumatra, where they have the orang pendek. And you had mentioned the orang pendek earlier. The orang pendek could be the same creature as Homo floresiensis, but the natives on this island of Flores call it Ebu Gogo. 2 words, EBU, and then space G-O-G-O, Ebu Gogo. That was their native word for this creature. And you can look that up also on the internet, and they interview some of the people who live there, and they say that they only went extinct about 7 generations ago. And they hunted giant rats that lived on this island of Flores and a small type of elephant that lived on this, also on the
Hey,
island.
Bill, thank you for bringing that up. Let's get some comments from Melba about it. Melba, one reason this is significant is because here's evidence that there was a species living there, might have been living there at the same time that modern humans were, and yet, supposedly we know everything about our planet. We didn't know that this one existed.
No, and, their DNA is unique, so, that's why I made the comment. We don't live in the world we think we do. There's just no way, because there's things out there we the older I get, the less I know. Let's put it that way, because I'm shocked daily by things that come up, and some of it's valid, some of it isn't. Some of it just leaves you with your mouth hanging open. And there's lots of stories of, quote, little people. A lot of the habituators, the Sasquatch habituators, have seen little people, they claim, and they're allegedly exist. I would think they would be much harder to see than any Bigfoot. So who knows? There's that possibility. You can't deny any possibility of anything anymore, I don't believe. Not with as many human hybrids are coming out and different species of humans that they're finding in antiquity, in the fossil record and what have you. So you just have to be open-minded as a scientist and as a human.
The march of history is sort of a lesson in increasing humility, in a sense. Thanks for the call,
absolutely.
Bill. Thanks for the call, Bill. John in Thornton, Colorado. Hi, John. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum. John's gone. How about Jody in North Dakota? Hello?
Good evening, George.
How you doing?
I'm doing fine. And Dr. Ketchum, I have a couple of bullet or points that I'd like to kind of throw at you and Dr. Ketchum both, George.
Okay.
I'm a Coast Insider. I've been listening for many, many years. I'm a former veteran, very well-traveled person. I'm also Native American from this region of the United States.
What tribe?
Mandan and Hidatsa and Chippewa.
Oh.
And Norwegian, as it would be. Okay. Dr. Ketchum, I applaud you in so many ways. I've listened to you many times. I like how you stand for these creatures, because these creatures are one step above us. They're not below us in the scale of things. They're one step above us in the scale of things. They're very sensitive creatures. They live in the woods. They live in the wilds of the woods. They're very prone to avoid humans. We are the most dangerous creature on the planet.
That's true.
And, they avoid us at all costs. The only interactions you're ever going to have with these creatures is by accident or from a telescopic lens. And with your stance, in staying with the scientific view of things, you're scientists. If anyone would skepticize what you do, challenge them this question. Do you trust your doctor? If they trust their doctor, then they should have trust in you. You're an expert in what you do. He's an expert in what he's supposed to do. Again, I'm sorry. I'm very happy to be on the show, and I've got so many things to say.
Jody, let me ask you this: your observations about Sasquatch, about Bigfoot, is that a personal observation, or is that something sort of that you've derived from tribal lore, legends, conversations?
It's both, George. I hitchhiked down from Washington State to California along the coast, along the When I was younger, I was 18 years old. I hitchhiked down there in the quiets of the woods, on the highways, and I saw a lot of things. These creatures lurk in the woods just off the highways, everywhere. They see the vehicles go by. That's why they don't come around. We've blocked off all their routes that they used to follow through the tree lines.
What I'm wondering is if there are discussions as you grew up among Chippewa or your lineage,
Yes,
elders, yeah?
Yes, sir. There are many, many stories of these creatures. Not so much on the Plains tribes, which is where I'm from, is in the Plains. The tribes of the woodlands are the tribes that will have and hold the legends, the oral stories of these creatures in our interactions with these creatures throughout time, throughout all time. I challenge any researcher, besides Dr. Ketchum, any researcher out there that wants to find these creatures and find out what they are, speak to the Indians, listen to them for once, hear what they have to tell you, but do it in a respectful manner. I'm not saying any researcher like these goofy TV shows that make this into something crazy. It's not. It's just another being above us.
Dr. Ketchum, let me thank you, Jody. Appreciate that input. Melba, do you have sort of Native American tribal advisors? Are you in the loop with have a dialogue?
I am. There's a chief in particular that we've had long discussions over it. He contacted me and he wanted to know what experiences I had with him, and I went into detail, stuff that I don't tell anybody. And he says, I know you're for real because you're telling me our tribal legends and what we know about them. And we've become good friends after that. And, so I know it's not just him, it's others. I've got a number of Native American friends that, have shared things that I can't share, things that, validated everything that I've been through, and habituators have been through in general, a lot of it. And it's just very fascinating. And, we do need to listen to the Native Americans. A lot of what their tribal legends state can be founded in fact. And, like he said, for once listen, people should, but they don't.
Are there any tribes that you've found that are hostile or just think it's a bunch of baloney? I'm just wondering if tribes
there's some that think they're bad. They apparently have, clans of Bigfoot around them that are bad. So they think they're, demonic or evil spirits or whatever. But most of the tribes either coexist or they find them to be helpful in that, they are the harbinger of danger or to straighten out something. They consider it good. And some tribes even think that you're blessed if you are able to actually see one. And so there's a lot of legend there that I think has basis in fact, if people will listen. And, they don't want them harmed either, so, they don't come out with a lot of their stuff. It's told in confidence. I can't share, a lot of what I've been told.
Well, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we had a hard time finding a lot of songs about giants or tall people, so this is sort of a song that goes out to the giants from about short people, the rest of us, I guess. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum. We'll get back to the phone lines in just a moment. September 11th, 2001, Paul McCartney was sitting in an airplane on the tarmac at New York's JFK Airport when the towers came tumbling down. 24 hours later, he wrote this song, this anthem, Freedom, and donated all the proceeds. It's a stirring tune. I'm sure you agree. We're talking with Dr. Melba Ketchum. We have one segment remaining. You're asking questions about Sasquatch and DNA. You're welcome to ask about the topic we thought we would be discussing tonight, meaning giants and the search for that kind of DNA evidence, because Dr. Ketchum is also chasing after that. As far as Richard Dewhurst, he was supposed to be the guest tonight. We've put out sort of an APB, an all points bulletin for him, because he is missing in action, and either he's missing or his phone is messed up. Either way, we'll try to get him on another time. But we're happy to have Dr. Ketchum here, and apparently you're pretty happy too, because the phone lines are lit up and have stayed full ever since she's been here. We'll get back to the phones in just a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. Our final segment with my guest, Dr. Melba Ketchum. Melba, I hope you didn't have any early morning appointments. Really do appreciate you sticking around, and it looks like the audience is responding because, as I said, every line is full.
Well,
International.
I appreciate it.
It's fun.
I want to say that if anybody has questions that they want to ask me, they can go on my public Facebook at Dr. Melba Ketchum and PM me, and we'll try to get an answer back to you. It may take a few days, but we try to answer what comes through.
Well, good. That's good to know. Somebody sent me a note. They said they thought they crashed your website. I hope that's not the case, but it might have been a bit overwhelmed with all the response from the audience tonight. International
I'll
line.
Check it.
Yeah.
It'll be
International.
If that's the case.
On our international line, Jeff is calling in from Toronto. Hi, Jeff. You're on with Dr. Ketchum.
Thank you very much. Actually, I'm just north of Toronto in a small city called Orillia, and that's Orillia. The reason why I wanted to call is back in 1967, maybe 68, we were noted for having the tallest male mayor in Canada, and his name was John Palmer, and the last name is Palmer. And he was well over 7 feet tall, and when you were, and I'm not online, I'm sorry, Dr. Ketchum, so I can't send you any information, but the thing is that his son is the same age as me. He's John, named after his dad, is 62 years of age and living in Kingston, Ontario. And and he was a teacher, he's a musician, and I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you were to contact him that he would be more than willing to supply a DNA sample for you to see whether or not he is of that hybrid lineage, because there were some very, very noticeable characteristics of his dad being well over 7 feet in height, and it was just one of those quirky things. And I've heard about this, and then when I heard you talking tonight or this morning, I thought, well, I should give you a call. And because he was our mayor, there will be a lot of photographic evidence in archives, whether it's with the city of Orillia or the daily paper, which is the Orillia Packet and Times. So there will be a lot of photographic evidence, as well as I say, his son still living in Kingston, Ontario, and whether or not it's mitochondrial DNA, there's his son and John, his son, when I saw him about 5 years ago, he's, I'd say probably close to 6'8".
Huh. That's an interesting point, Jeff. Melba, is there value in just sort of testing tall people to see if there's strange DNA there?
Yes and no. I mean, there are people that are just tall. I mean, a lot of the Nordic races are very tall normally. However, I feel there will be some people, especially those that are of Native American or First Peoples descent, that will, possibly have this in them. A quick and rather inexpensive way for somebody who's curious about their own DNA is 23andMe has I think it's a $99 test where they'll tell you how much Neanderthal, how much Denisovan, how much unknown DNA you have in you, as well as anything else you have. So I think that's money well spent if somebody's curious about it. If they have a pretty high percentage of unknown DNA, then those would be ones that we would be really interested in looking at.
Oh, that's interesting. I had a test done. It was more for ancestry, native homeland kind of test.
Sold is for ancestry, but you get with the 23andMe program, they do a lot of SNPs and they do nuclear, and so you get a broader view.
Oh, it's fun though. It contains some surprises even for me. I'm not related to Sasquatch, but there were other surprises in there. Thanks, Jeff, for that call. East of the Rockies, Glenn in Texas. Hi, Glenn. You're on with Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Hello, George. Hello, Dr. Ketchum.
Howdy.
I have 2 questions for you, Doctor, but I'd like to set them up.
Okay.
By the time I was in my teens, I had already read, 20-some-odd years of National Geographic, and I've continued that. And I've been an outfitter, a hunter, consider myself a naturalist. I think being alone is the only way to go out in the woods myself. I spoke to you the first time you were on Coast to Coast, and as I understood it then, you had nothing whatsoever to do with any kind of cryptid or any experience like that involvement. And when you said enablers, did you say enablers, or you're talking about outfitters, right? The people that take you out to see Bigfoot?
No,
habituators?
Initiators?
No, they took me out. They're people that actually interact with the Sasquatch and have experiences with them and really know more than anybody about them because they interact with them. And there are those people, most of them are very silent about their interaction because of fear of all the retribution that comes down the pipe when you step out of everybody's comfort zone with knowledge. So, no. And as far as somebody who's used to being in nature and feels comfortable by themselves, that's fine. But a lot of people are not naturalists or not been in the woods their entire life. Those are the ones that really need to take a buddy.
Glenn, what were you getting at?
That's true, of course. But my question is that you seemed in the first interview, as I said before, you had nothing to do. Now you've been taken out with these people, and they seem to know exactly where to go and when to see. And
they come to you. They will come to you if they know you. They will come to you.
Well, my question is, first question is
what?
The counties and dates of the sightings.
Oh, I won't reveal that because I will not. I will protect the Sasquatch.
Oh, okay. And
but I did not have any experience prior to that. Let's put it that way.
I see.
The paper was pretty well completed by the time I actually started having experiences with them.
I see.
I didn't even believe they existed when I started this.
Yes, but I'm not a big computer person, but I am sitting in front of a 500 square foot library, so I'm not reading a paragraph or two about something and then thinking I'm an expert. I actually know what I'm talking about. And I know about outfitters and the people you're running around with, and I figure if they're trying to pass a bill to keep anybody from shooting a Bigfoot, it's probably so they'll have a free hand at doing what they're doing, whether it's honest or not. And my second question is, we all know giraffe come from the plains of Africa. Can you tell me where the chicken comes from?
Does that have any relevance to what we're discussing here?
No, it's just personal information that I'd like to know about you.
I don't know where a chicken... I mean, there's chickens from antiquity. Where, for the first place, one is mentioned in history, I don't know. I've never been one to study chickens.
Thanks, Glenn. Appreciate the call. Interesting perspective. West of the Rockies, Teresa in Nevada County, California. Teresa, you're on with Dr. Ketchum.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Sure.
So my question, two questions to Melba. I know and have spent time with one of the people that submitted a sample to your original study, and we all had high hopes of what you would prove. Two other labs tested the same sample, and it came back black bear.
It was
and I'm wondering what you think of that.
Physically
and my next
see the
question
pictures and tell it's a different sample. And that's why I don't even...
Hold on a second. Hold on. Let's let Teresa finish what she's going to say, and then we'll jump in. Teresa, go ahead.
Why you would ask the person that submitted the sample to destroy the rest of his sample.
I never did that.
Okay, so he's lying.
Yes.
Okay, so and you confirmed that his sample was a hybrid human Sasquatch.
Very good sample, yes.
Okay, so what about the other two labs that said it was black bear?
They were right because of the fact, and let me make this very clear, it is not the same sample. And it is not the same sample visibly because there were pictures of it posted, and the hair is not the same texture nor length. It had fur underneath, and the Sasquatch samples do not have a fur undercoat that we have tested. So absolutely, physically, it is not the same sample. It did not test. We did double-blind studies on this. I extracted a sample. Another lab extracted a sample. We sent the samples in together to different labs. So I didn't even touch one of the samples, and the results were identical. Human mitochondrial DNA and a mixture of human and unknown DNA in the nuclear DNA. So I am very confident of the results because we were able to test that sample in tandem without me laying hands on one of the samples from the same piece of tissue. So that of all the samples, and there's a lot of proof that I put onto the Sasquatch Genome Project website that will show you exactly what I'm talking about. It will show you the actual sequences obtained. And like I say, I'm absolutely positive of the results on that. I am absolutely disgusted of the things that have been said. It's back to, what George was discussing early on about the problems with the Bigfoot community, and just absolutely not true.
Teresa, are you saying that the guy who submitted the sample was told that 2 labs said it was a bear?
Yes.
And is this somebody
Yes.
you know well? And so
Yes.
Melba,
I
have
spent
you
a lot
heard?
of time with him? Yes.
So Melba, have you heard this before? That
Absolutely. That's why there's a whole page dedicated to it on the website to debunk these claims.
So
what you're saying then is is the person, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say its name, I almost did, is lying about he sent you the sample, and then you're saying it's a different sample, and there's also blood on his boots that is still
I didn't test
there.
those. I did not
know you
test
did,
those.
because he still got them.
Uh-huh.
But I'm confused of why you say that it's a different piece of flesh.
They
that
sent
was
a tissue sample from a black bear to 2 different labs to debunk my study. My understanding, and this is just my understanding, is that he was afraid he was going to get, booked for homicide when it came out human on the mitochondrial DNA. I don't know. That's just what I've been told. I also know he has said a lot of things that aren't true, including that I was raped by a Bigfoot on a video, and which is ridiculous. So with that in mind, I just avoid discussing that sample because of controversy like this, because it's not worth it to me.
Teresa, thank you for the call. Melba, so this, help me sort this out. So the samples that you submitted, blind tests to the lab, came back with the results that you described. Somebody else submitted to 2 labs. They submitted additional samples on their own outside the study?
It was allegedly from the guy that submitted the original sample. And, the sample we had was basically white hair. It was long and wavy, and the tissue itself was quite moist. It was fresh. We were able to get really good DNA, and the pictures of the other samples submitted, because they put it on a website to try to debunk me, they were very dried, and it was black hair, and was, had a fur undercoat, and it was more straight. It wasn't as long. So, obviously 2 different specimens, morphologically, hair-wise. And then, they got one where his DNA was contaminated, so they tried to say my sample was his DNA. But we had run the same test that they got, and, the DNA was different, so it wasn't his DNA. So, it's just been a big fiasco with that. So I try not to even go there with it, because it's not worth. I shouldn't have to defend myself. I've got good science. I've got the proofs. I've got the pictures. I've got double-blind studies on that sample. I've posted all of the material online on the website for anybody that's curious, and they can, easily compare the results and see, the difference. And
you've got some, you've written something that directly refutes the stuff that was just raised. That addresses it directly.
It's a whole page on the extra data or something. I forget what we call the page, but it's on the website.
Let's try to get one more call in. First-time caller, Wayne. You lucked out. You got on the show. You're calling in from Bowling Green. Better make it a quick one for my guest, Dr. Ketchum.
Yes, I'll get right to it. I was wondering if she had seen Les Stroud's first 2 shows with Todd Standing, and what she thinks of Todd Standing's work, and has she heard anything about his Stroud's upcoming 3 or 4 shows?
Okay, I don't comment on other people's stuff, and I don't watch that kind of thing on TV, because I've had I've had experience with what they're putting on, and so much of it's not real and not good, so I don't watch it, and I don't comment. So who knows what anybody has that's on TV. And, I don't mean that in any ugly way. It's just that it's just not an interest to me to watch it on TV. I do my research in other manners. And, you know, when I watch TV, I usually watch the news or movies.
Is that a Sasquatch show, Wayne? Is that one of the Sasquatch?
He turned it into one.
Okay.
He did 2 shows in somewhere in Canada with Todd Standing, and he's going to do 3 or 4 more starting, I think, April 3rd.
All right. Well, do you think it's a pretty good show? You like it?
Well, Les Stroud seems pretty. He has talked about hearing some sounds in previous shows, once in Alaska and once in Canada, that he wondered what it was. Once he was in a tent with his ex-wife, and something during the night walked right up to it, and he tells it as the truth. He admits he doesn't know, and he has to be shown, or it has to be proven to him.
All right, I have to check it out. Thanks for the call. Thanks to all of our callers tonight. There was some interesting questions and comments and good interaction there. Melba, can't thank you enough. I hope people will check out your web pages and all the material, and they can make up their own minds about it. But thank you for hanging in there for us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I'll talk to you again. Please keep me in the loop. Thanks to my colleagues there at Coast to Coast, Dan Galani, Gina Salvati, our webmaster Lex, and producer Chris Boros, and Richard Dewhurst. Richard Dewhurst, wherever you are, hope you're okay. I can't wait to hear this one. Thanks, everyone. Good night. I'll be back in a couple of weeks.